Events begin to take place in a dark alley, where very loud screams and groans were heard, as if someone was being beaten. As it turned out, the red-haired young man was hit incredibly hard by some bully who considered him trash and wished him only harm. In fact, the guy who was beaten owed money to the hooligans who decided to teach him a lesson. The cunning scoundrels did everything possible to ensure that the debtor paid off his debt as soon as possible, because otherwise they would have beaten the guy even worse. Thinking about everything that was happening, the young man was sad, because he understood that it would be extremely difficult for him to find the money that had previously been lent. Having come to his senses, the red-haired guy began to walk down the street, because he needed to get home. The crying hero's name was Wu Feng. He was an orphan since childhood, because his parents sent him to an orphanage. When he was 6 years old, the orphanage survived a fire. Without housing, he had to beg for food from those around him. The government, of course, helped, and even helped him get an education. At the age of 18, Wu Feng, together with several of his friends, opened a business with the money they had saved. Unfortunately, as a result, the friends ran away with all the money, taking with them his girlfriend at that time. After themselves, the so-called friends left only a mess in the room where they were supposed to develop their business together. In order to cover the losses, the guy had to take out loans from very dangerous people. Due to the constant lack of money and high interest rates, Wu Feng was constantly beaten by creditors. But the crying guy still did not lose hope and continued to think that he would be able to pay off his debt. Turning around, the young man saw something very strange in the trash, passing near it nearby. Reaching out to the trash can, Wu discovered a child lying in the trash and not making a single sound. It was clear from the little child's face that he felt very bad, because he had sunken cheeks and bags under his eyes. This child made the young man empathize with the little child, because he understood that this child did not deserve such an attitude towards himself. Having died in this garbage dump, a child will never grow up to be a good person, because his lot as a foundling is to find eternal peace. Taking the child with him, Wu Feng only hoped that in the next life the child would be born into a rich family. The weather was very bad outside, a thunderstorm was visible, and there was also a continuous downpour. The main character had already begun to dig a small hole, because he thought that the child had already lost his life and would no longer be able to exist in this world. After a few minutes, the guy still managed to dig a suitable hole in order to finish what he started. Suddenly, someone behind him exclaimed that the heavens would not let him die. Immediately after that, loud laughter began to be heard from behind the youth, and Wu turned around to see who was talking. It turned out that it was the same baby, wrapped in cloth. He stood and, like a madman, looked at the main character, expecting to hear at least some answer from him. This baby was really smart because he had pretended to be dead and was now standing on his own 2 legs and laughing at the guy for believing him. All this time, Wu Feng believed that the child was already dead, but as it turned out, thanks to the human spirit, the child regained consciousness. Due to the fact that Wu Feng was able to save the baby, the child realized that somehow the hero was his savior, and he wanted to help change his fate. Using her magical abilities, the child exclaimed that the boy's real fate was indeed quite bad. After using magic, the little child discovered something that really surprised him. Unfortunately, due to the fact that these events were truly shocking for the young man, he literally died from fear and lost his life. As soon as Wu Feng died, the child's spell immediately began to evaporate, and he did not understand how this was even possible. Realizing that his abilities were literally evaporating, the child began to think that after all these failures, heaven would resist correcting the boy's real fate. And instead of influencing fate, the magical child's charms literally evaporate. Looking at the helpless guy, the child began to think about how it was possible to help him. After thinking a little, the smart child realized that there was only one way to help this hero. Some time later, the main character woke up in bed, not understanding what had happened to him earlier. Looking around, Wu Feng could not understand where he was, because it was not his home. As soon as the young man stood up, someone nearby immediately noticed that he had woken up. In fact, the fact that Wu Feng woke up was noticed by the same child who had previously been completely defenseless and looked more like a baby. Looking around, the hero could not understand how the child knew his name. It was also unclear what was happening in that forest, and where that talking baby was. The child knew that Wu Feng had a lot of questions, but his body was not in perfect order right now. First of all, now they were together in the apartment that belonged to the baby. The child's middle name is Shunyuzi, the so-called gem god. As a result of the disaster, he was turned into a baby who was literally just born. Fortunately, Wu Yifeng was able to save Shunyuzi, and thus he was alive, although he could have died. Hearing this, the young man was literally shocked, because he could not even imagine that he had saved God. The moment the main character picked up and hugged Shunyuzi, he absorbed the human spirit of his body and came to consciousness. This shocked the guy even more, and he immediately realized that the little boy was the same baby he had previously saved. A baby was indeed not the most convenient form for existence, which is why the deity, with the help of charms, maintained the body shape of a child of 6 or 7 years old. Shunyuzi asked the main character to listen to him carefully, because he wanted to correct his fate with the help of his magical powers, which are already 300 years old. The god of gems wanted Wu Yifeng to use his power, which he would transfer to him, because thanks to it he would be able to learn from his many years of experience. Extending his hand, Shunyuzi exclaimed that nobody forbids him to work with old people, and even such experienced ones. The divine essence wanted to go all this way with his savior, because this was the only way to thank Wu Yifeng. For the main character, this whole story was really shocking, and he even thought about collaborating with the boy. Sighing heavily, Wu Yifeng still realized that this kid probably just reread the comics and imagined himself to be God. Some time later, the guy decided to leave the mansion in order to return home. Due to his long absence from the city, the young man felt uneasy, because he understood that he needed to earn money as soon as possible in order to give it to creditors. Suddenly, someone behind them exclaimed Wu Yifeng's name because they recognized him from behind. It turned out that these were the same hooligans who had previously beaten the main character in the gateway. Feeling great fear, the young man began to shout that he had no money and now he could not give it away. One of the scoundrels immediately began to approach the guy and shouted that by beating him even harder, they could account for the work done. Wu Yifeng began to get even more nervous, because he realized that he could not resist 3 bullies at once. Getting even more angry, the guy shouted with all his might that they should not dare approach him. For the scoundrels, this was truly a shocking statement, because they saw that Wu Yifeng seemed to have some kind of magical power. Examining his hands, the guy could not understand what had happened, because nothing like this had ever happened to his body before. I understand that it is necessary to act. The hooligans took out their knives and shouted to Wu Yifeng that now he would definitely not be able to resist them. The insolent people were literally going to finish off the young man, thinking that he was defenseless and would not be able to resist. Using his hand, Wu began to defend himself in order to at least somehow not get hurt in such a difficult situation. It turned out that thanks to such protection, the scoundrel's knife was knocked out of his hands, and now there was only one rival left who owned the weapon. The blow that was dealt by the main character was truly impressive, because of it the bully began to scream in pain, because his hand was damaged. Meanwhile, behind, the second hooligan continued his attack on the young man, who did not even suspect that they were trying to stab him. Turning around, the frightened Wu Yifeng noticed the attacker and began to think about what he should do. Looking at his opponent, the hero noticed that he literally slowed down, and certainly with a slow-mo effect. Thanks to this, the smart Wu Yifeng was able to dodge the blow because the opponent was too slow. Realizing that in this way a counterattack could be launched, Wu Yifeng began to act. Experiencing strong rage towards the scoundrel, the young man began to swing his hand in order to strike. The attack was indeed effective, because with the help of a regular blow it was possible to neutralize the scoundrel who had just tried to commit a crime. With only one blow, the main character managed to neutralize the attacker, causing him to fall to the floor. The frightened criminals immediately began to run away, because they realized that their enemy was much stronger than themselves. Looking at his hand, the red-haired young man did not understand how this was possible, because he had never possessed such power before. At that very moment, Wu Yifeng realized that what Shunyuzi had previously told him was true. A few minutes later, the hero decided to run to the child, who at that moment was already waiting for him. The boy had big plans for Wu Yifeng, because he could become quite a promising student. Hearing this, the young man immediately began to understand that, after all, he was a complete loser. But after he found one baby in the trash, his world literally changed in a few hours. Realizing that Shunyuzi had helped him gain incredible strength, the guy immediately bowed to the strongest child. Looking at his guest, the child did not understand what was going on, and decided to find out why he did this. As it turned out, the guy decided to talk about the fact that he needed money, because the interest on his debt had increased incredibly. As a sign of gratitude, after he receives the money, he can immediately return the power he received previously. After listening to the guy, Shen Yuzi immediately ordered him to stand up, because he couldn't listen to this anymore. The boy decided to exclaim that Wu Yifeng was now under the influence of his charm. That is why an ordinary person who has acquired such power must be careful and finally come to his senses. Sighing heavily, the child nevertheless said that now he was also a beggar. The disaster happened just at the time he bought this house with all his last savings, and was going to rent it out during the holidays and charge rent to the tenants, but who knew that the disaster would return him to the body of a child? That is why the two interlocutors now both needed money. However, Shen Yuzi had a grand plan, which was why they could cooperate together. Thanks to the concocted plan, they could help catch evil spirits for money. Shen was going to transfer all his experience along with power to Wu Yifeng, and they could divide the proceeds in half. Having heard information about evil spirits, the main character was simply shocked, because he had no idea how it was possible to catch evil spirits. The worried young man immediately began to doubt, because he thought that he clearly would not be able to catch evil spirits. Shen Yuzi immediately began to shout at the guy, saying that he was behaving like a girl. Looking at the alarmed Wu Yifeng, Shen understood that there was no need to humiliate himself in front of him, and that he should concentrate in order to gather all the strength that was given to him. At that very second, the main character realized that he had suffered most of his life, and he could also spend another part of his life if he did not take this chance. The young man immediately began to remember all the saddest moments from his life, as well as his huge financial debt. Thanks to these memories, the main character finally decided that he would cooperate with Shen Yuzi. The smart child immediately exclaimed that this was really the right decision, because in this way they could earn a huge amount of money. After which, the boy decided to hand over the documents, where information about their first task was written. In 3 days they had to develop a witchcraft formula, and having learned it, they immediately had to go to battle. As it turned out, the eldest daughter of the Jian family was possessed by a demon, and after 3 days it was necessary to help her so that she could live her usual life. Events continued to take place 3 days later in the Jian family home. The kind butler invited 2 guests who came to help with the exorcism of the demon. The trained sorcerers were ready for a tough fight in order to earn money from their first task. Looking around, the main character could not believe that a huge number of people would come to complete this task. There were truly a huge number of people, and they all had supernatural abilities, thanks to which it was possible to exorcise the devil. This announcement had been up for a year, and the reward was attractive, so it was not surprising that so many people came. However, there was one nuance that greatly worried Shen Yuzi. Suddenly, doctors nearby opened the door and began shouting for all the people nearby to step aside and allow the doctors to pass. Not understanding what was happening, the main character was watching what was happening all this time. After all, as it turned out, one of the priests who tried to help expel the demon was seriously injured, and could no longer help with the task. This sight was extremely unpleasant for Wu Yifeng, and he was even more worried because he thought that the same thing could happen to him. A boy weak from illness and a weaned child also came to catch evil spirits. But according to some old man, this was not a place for games, so the child and the weak guy had no place here. Each of those present sincerely believed that Shen Yuzi and the main character came here in vain, because they would never be able to drive out such a powerful demon. This did not bother the child at all, and he was completely relaxed the whole time, only telling Wu Yifeng that they would now show what they really could do. Thanks to their skills, they were able to skip the line in order to try to expel the strongest demon from the girl. Each of those present was against such an outcome of events. After all these people dared to come here in order to complete a difficult task. The pay for this task was incredibly high, which is why there was also competition. The events caused anxiety in the main character, and immediately certain memories from childhood began to arise. As a child, Wu Yifeng had serious problems, because none of his classmates wanted to play with him, and everyone threw stones at him. Everyone considered the main character to be trash and did not want to be friends with him, because he was a born whipping boy. Wu Yifeng could not get rid of this bullying, and he simply continued to endure being beaten. As it turned out, when all the Odnoklasniki were having a hard time, they used Wui Feng as their outlet, and beat him all the time. But now is the time to fix everything, because now, Wui Feng has grown up, and he is ready to fight back. Continuing to watch Wui Feng, the old man became angry, because he thought that with his words he could easily drive the young man away. The main character decided not to tolerate the old man's antics and shouted to him that he was annoying. And now he will prove that everyone present here is not capable of completing this task, and only he can help in this situation. Looking at the boy, Shinyuzi was very happy that he had finally fought back, and no longer tolerated bullying in his direction. All the magicians immediately got angry and literally started screaming for Wui Feng to get lost with the child and not waste their time. The butler was confused by this whole situation, and he immediately began to ask those present to calm down, because he understood that if they fought here, they might break something. Smiling at the man, the boy immediately asked his uncle the butler not to worry. After all, in a few minutes they can end all this, thanks to the fact that the task will be completed. One of the villains began to use the magical technique of a hunted tiger, which he seeks to destroy. The guy with the big teeth used his pocket frying pan and used the chef's magic strike technique. The old man used his stinky hand and used the rooster grab technique. All the scoundrels wanted the death of the main character and were going to attack him. Fortunately, Wui Feng was prepared for such a turn of events, and was going to fight back the freaks that dared to attack him. Only thanks to one technique called the Divine Fist of a Buddhist monk, the main character was able to literally destroy each of his enemies. For the butler, this sight was incredible, because he could not even imagine that only one guy could defeat such a large number of enemies. Now no one doubted Wui Feng's strength, and everyone understood that he was truly capable of expelling the demon. Suddenly, from a door nearby they shouted for the next magician to come inside and exorcise the devil. Hearing this, the main character immediately realized that this was his only chance to prove himself, and he needed to act. Shinyuzi understood that now they would be able to skip the line, because his new comrade easily defeated absolutely everyone. Confident guys went inside the room to examine the patient, but what they saw next shocked them, because they did not expect that the patient would look exactly like this. The girl was tied up and sitting on the bed, and around her there were traces of cherry jam, which she was still smeared with. The seemingly insane girl raised her head to look at her visitors. The girl's worried parents stood nearby and watched her, hoping that they would help her now. All this time, the main character continued to watch the girl, and still did not understand why she was smeared in cherry jam. This girl's name was Jian Nan, she was 18 years old, and she was also the only daughter of the Jian family. Looking at his partner, the child immediately noticed that he was literally drooling over the girl's beauty. The girl's mother watched the guys anxiously and asked if they could really help. Calling themselves specialists, the main character exclaimed that they would certainly be able to help in this difficult situation. After thinking for a while, Shinyuzi decided to exclaim that they can be called brother miracle workers. After all, they are indeed qualified miracle workers. The girl's father decided to tell him that there was a serious evil spirit in his daughter's body. Before, not one of the gentlemen had been able to help in any way in the situation, which is why there were doubts about the competence of such young magicians. These words immediately upset Shinyuzi, because he thought that they doubted his abilities. In fact, they did not doubt their strength, they simply did not understand whether the young mages would really be able to help in such a difficult situation. The girl, smeared in cherry jam, was unconscious. She was tied up so that she could not get out of the room and harm the others. As Shinyuzi continued to watch the girl, he realized that he needed to prepare the light of contemplation first. This was a spell that had an inexplicable healing gaze. The main character immediately began to use a magic spell, which he had recently learned, but already literally mastered it perfectly. The spell literally allowed you to look into the girl's soul and see what kind of disease she really had. The young man continued to repeat that he would now complete the ritual he had begun and would help the girl with her illness. Using his magical gaze, Wui Feng did everything possible to understand what kind of demon was in the girl's soul. The magical radiance immediately began to disturb the patient's father, and he did not understand what was really happening. As soon as the spell was used on the girl, she immediately began to tremble and show signs of life. Unexpectedly, the demon inside the lady began to emerge, and the dark aura overtook the main character along with his partner. The frightened parents did not understand what to do in this situation, but were extremely happy that the demon was finally leaving Jian Nan. In fact, this sight was truly creepy, because for the first time the main character saw a demon coming out of a person's body. Strange marks began to appear on the girl's body, indicating that a demon was taking over her body. The enraged look of the possessed girl was immediately directed at the saviors who were trying to help her. Feeling very angry, the demon began to shout that he would now take revenge for the actions that were carried out in this room. The dark essence did not want to allow it to be expelled from Jian Nan's body, which is why the demon began to attack the sorcerers, using its strongest magic. Using his trick, the main character immediately decided to dodge such a serious blow. Watching everything that happened, the guy realized that the spirit was heading towards his father, and he was going to use a second spell to stop it. Hearing this, Shen Yuzi was immediately against it, because he understood that in this way it was possible to harm the body of this young girl, and it was necessary to first expel this creature from her body. Suddenly, the child saw that his partner was simply afraid to come close to the possessed girl. In fact, Shen Yuzi has accomplished many feats and can say that if this dark force gets to him, it will simply tickle him. The main character was incredibly glad that the dark force was not something harmful for him, and he immediately began to attack. The possessed girl continued to make furious attacks with which she wanted to finish off her saviors. Thanks to his new abilities, the main character was easily able to dodge and defend against incredibly powerful attacks. Coming closer, the good-natured guy put his hand to the girl's forehead and continued to perform the exorcism ritual. Wu Yifeng began shouting at the little demon, calling him a vile creature, to come out to him, and leave the girl's body alone. And it really worked, because thanks to the ritual used, the guy easily managed to expel the demons from the body of the possessed lady. The parents literally could not believe what was happening, and they joyfully approached their daughter to see if she was truly saved. The little demon began to look at his body, and could not believe that he had now been completely banished. Looking at his partner, Shen Yuzi began to shout to him that he needed to use his second spell, because thanks to it they would be able to collect their salary. Feeling intense rage towards the demon, the hero began to use a secret technique to exorcise the devil, called touching the 7-year-old snake. Such a spell was quite painful for the demon, and he immediately began screaming that it was not worth killing him and begging for mercy. For Wu Yifeng, these words were unconvincing, and he used a secret technique to finally finish off the villain. Some time later, Jian Nan began to open her eyes, and not far from her stood her joyful parents who could not believe what was happening. "I don't understand anything." The girl wanted to understand where she was still glad that she finally saw her dad and mom. The joyful man exclaimed that it was really good that these two experts helped in this situation, and Jian Nan finally came to her senses. Realizing that the task was completed, Shen Yuzi decided to wave his hand to the girl in order to greet her. Looking at this child, the girl could not believe that this little devil had saved her. But Shen Yuzi decided to tell about his partner. After all, they are famous representatives of a company called the Miracle Workers Brothers, and that nasty werewolf fox came out of her body, and now she is saved. Feeling awkward, the main character also decided to say hello to the rescued girl, because he really liked her. Looking at the second savior, Jian Nan simply could not believe that all this time she had been possessed by such a vile demon. Feeling sincere joy, the girl immediately ran to hug her savior to show gratitude. This gesture greatly embarrassed the young man, because now he was being hugged by a girl whom he liked very much. All this time, Jian Nan smiled, because she understood that now she could live her normal life. Starting to cry, the girl thanked the savior, because she was sincerely grateful for this feat. Some time later, the girl's father handed over a bag containing payment for the services provided. The man was sincerely grateful to the saviors of his daughter, because he understood that they had done a great job today. Bowing his head, Shen Yuzi admitted that it was a great honor for them to come to the Jian family's house, and there was no need to thank him, because it was their duty. Sighing heavily, the smart master hinted that the payment would not be enough for him. After all, some time ago, the child saw that there was a huge amount of money in the documents, and one can say for sure that this organism that they kicked out of her is quite rare, even if it was very simple. In addition, the family has a fairly rich house, everyone wears expensive clothes and eats good food. This was beneficial for the demon, and he coveted Jian Nan's body. Namely, today, a team of smart magicians dealt with this werewolf fox, and now they should receive a worthy reward. Because the next day, an evil snake, as well as a demonic snake, and maybe a demonic cat, may appear, wanting to take possession of Jian Nan's body. Bowing before the young master, the man immediately decided to find out if he would save their daughter again. Coming closer to the man, the child put his hand on his shoulder and asked the owner of the house to stand up, because the miracle worker brothers cannot leave someone to their fate. All you have to do is pay Mr. Zion generously, and the brothers guarantee that not a single evil spirit will dare to touch little sister Zion Nan. To resolve this issue, all that was needed was more money, and the brothers were ready to accomplish any feat. The determined man immediately shouted that he must protect his daughter in any way, no matter how much it costs. Turning his head, the caring father turned to the butler. The butler immediately brought 4 suitcases on a cart, which were to be given as payment. Thus, smart magicians could easily increase their income by providing services on a regular basis. Some time later, Wu Yifeng and the little master walked into the house and thought that who would have thought that so many evil spirits wanted to take possession of the girl's body. Feeling attracted to Jian Nan, the main character really wanted to protect her and do everything possible for this. Suddenly, the hero's partner suddenly began to laugh, and was literally shaking with laughter. In fact, all this was a huge joke, and the girl is in no danger, because Shen Yuzi simply scared her parents in order to get rich. Hearing this, the guy did not immediately understand such an insidious plan, but then realized that it was indeed very beneficial to them. The smart child understood that they did not need to be paid at the cost of their services. Looking at Shen Yuzi, Wu Yifeng only thought that this little imp was indeed very harmful. However, now they really had a lot of money. They would never have been able to accumulate so much in their entire lives. Addressing his teacher, the main character exclaimed that he wanted to take his share, but Shen Yuzi was against it, because this was their first deal. The young guy wanted to introduce Wu Yifeng tonight to the world of people who have money, which is why they had to spend most of the money to infiltrate the rich. Some time later, events continued to occur on an expensive yacht where the party was taking place. A large number of people were in the casino, where the main character was present along with his master. For Shen Yuzi, it was just a wonderful feeling to be in such a place, but the guy was embarrassed, because he understood that for every 10 games there are 9 losses, they should not gamble. The child didn't care, because indeed 9 losses in 10 games belongs to ordinary people, but he is actually a deity. Although the main character continued to be nervous, the child convinced him that he knew his capabilities and could win much more than an ordinary person. After all, this little guy was the god of gambling, who was simply quite modest. Approaching one of the halls, the guard turned to the magicians, saying that their 2 guests had a good idea, and they could lower the limit for entering the room to 10 million. After listening to the guard, the 2 comrades immediately realized that he thought that they had no money at all. Sighing heavily, the man explained that he had actually been misunderstood, and he was worried that they would enjoy all the benefits here for too long. For a child to place a bet of more than 10 million was not a problem, and he asked Wu Yifeng to show the chips they had. Delivery with chips, it contained a huge amount of the most expensive chips that could only be bought in a casino. This sight for the guard was truly impressive, and he could not believe that seemingly ordinary people were so rich. Feeling envious, the man immediately let the guests through and apologized to them, because he had made a mistake. As it turned out, Shen Yuzi had not been to this casino for a long time, because after using the spell, the money he won could only be used for charity, but playing for money and winning brought unprecedented pleasure, so it was difficult to give up this business. Unfortunately, the young man could not sit at the table this time because the casino workers already knew that he was constantly winning, which is why Wu Yifeng had to play. Looking at one of the chips, the main character began to think that nothing would really happen if he played with a few chips. Thus, the game began, and the dealer began to throw the dice in order to find out who the winner was. The worried young man watched everything that was happening and thought about whether he would be able to win today. The child was indeed a professional gambler, which is why he asked his partner to breathe evenly and slowly concentrate the power in his eyes. Using his magical abilities, the hero began to use eye magic, and thanks to them he began to see much more. Under the glass in which the dice were located, you could see exactly which numbers fell out, which is why you could make a profitable bet. For the guy, This was truly an amazing outcome of events, because he could not imagine that he would be able to see so much with the help of magic. Each of those present could not believe that a newcomer would be able to win so much money. A large crowd of people began to gather around the main character and his master, because everyone wanted to know what was happening there. No one could believe their eyes. Every person was amazed when he saw how much they won at this gaming table, because every prediction of Wu Yifeng was correct, and he could easily guess the dice combination. Each win brought unprecedented joy, because the main character could not believe that he was really capable of winning. This guy's success literally caused a stir among the crowd because he had already won several dozen times in a row. The smart young man nevertheless decided that it was necessary to go all in, and he bet all his chips in order to win as much money as possible. All people began to copy the bet from the main character, because they realized that he is never mistaken. The alarmed casino worker understood that this could not continue like this, and at least something had to be done. Using a mysterious button under the table, the girl decided that she needed to cheat and roll the dice. With the press of a button, the dice were re-rolled and the combination was now completely different. Seeing this, the young man immediately began to panic and turned to the Master of Gems, who told him that now he would teach him how to reincarnate into another body. Concentrating the magical power in the forehead area, the guy needed to focus his thoughts on the image of a mosquito. And it was a really effective tactic, because with the help of magic, something unusual came out of the protagonist's ear. As it turned out, it was a small mosquito that flew out of the guy's ear, and now he controlled the actions of the insect using the power of thought. The mosquito had to get under the glass, turn over the dice and come back. As soon as the glass was opened, it was discovered that the combination was exactly the one that a huge number of people had bet on. The worker could not believe what was happening, because she used the button to change the combination. The magical insect helped win the last game, thanks to which each of those who placed a bet in this game managed to win a huge amount of money. The team of smart magicians was incredibly happy, because now they had really earned a lot of money. The young man and the child rejoiced at every chip they earned. Now they were truly rich. The only thing in the main character's thoughts was that they won a large number of chips. For real money it was actually several thousand yuan. Having asked how much one chip costs, the main character found out that it costs 1 million. The realization of this news immediately caused panic in the young man, and now he began to realize that he really was playing for big money. Continuing to watch the strange guy, the casino worker did not understand what was going on, because at first glance this guy seemed to be playing this game for the first time. Suddenly, the child exclaimed that they could play here until 9 o'clock, and they needed to go somewhere else. Suddenly, the croupier exclaimed that she asked these two gentlemen to wait. The guards also approached the gaming table, and the girl said that these guys played so well today that her boss wants to see them. Looking at these scoundrels, the child immediately realized that there was no need for me to rush, because their angry glances could not intimidate them. Some time later, events continued to occur in the casino owner's office. The croupier prepared a huge amount of funds, which amounted to a large mountain of cash. Such a large sum incredibly amazed the main character, because he had never seen so much money in his life. Unexpectedly, someone nearby exclaimed that these players were indeed very lucky today, and he wanted to play with them. As it turned out, it was the owner of this establishment. Everyone called him Mr. Hong, and the guys could take this winnings for themselves. Feeling very interested, the child immediately decided to find out what they were playing for, but Wu Yifeng began to whisper to him that he shouldn't do this, because the owner of the casino was probably planning something. The smart man began to laugh and exclaimed that he saw that his guests were difficult people. That is why an unusual game was proposed, which is very interesting. In order to play this game, a huge soldier came, who had incredibly huge muscles and impressive height. This game consisted of having to fight this muscular guy with his fists. As for the game, they had to choose a person who would fight with his bodyguard, and the one who fell and could not get up would lose. Bodyguard A's name was Snake Fanjian, the tallest of the casino owner's subordinates. Even if you don't count his muscles of steel, he is a famous master of hand-to-hand combat. Thus, the main character, together with his master, may not fight and leave here, but then the money will remain with the casino owner. Experiencing great fear, the main character began to doubt his abilities, and Shen Yuzi decided to say that he also had not found a way to defeat this strong man, because he appeared very unexpectedly. In any case, the protagonist has 300 years of divine power within him, but his human body limits the effectiveness of the attack. Now we can say that Wu Yifeng did not temper his strength along the way of overcoming difficulties to improve himself, even though he is now fast and strong thanks to the strength that has appeared, but this is not enough. In simple terms, the main character was now like a full bucket, however, there is a small hole in it, due to which the water flows out, and there is less of it. The guy's task now is to widen this hole. The larger the hole, the more force he can use. And his strong body is going, as well as his abilities will increase, as well as his fighting skill. Feeling strong anger, the casino owner decided to find out whether his guests would fight. The smart guy exclaimed that he would still fight the snake Fan Jian. Although at first glance this fight was unequal, Wu Yifeng was ready to do everything possible to win this fight. To Snake A, the main character looked very weak indeed, like trash that needed to be thrown out. Having started to attack, the thug shouted that he would now crush the next insect that dared to fight him. Suddenly, a counterattack followed, and Wu Yifeng began to act. By using his magical abilities, the protagonist's body was improved, making it possible to continue attacking using 300-year-old magic. Seeing this, the casino owner was simply shocked, because he did not understand how this casino player could be so fast. The main character was also amazed by his abilities, because he could not expect that he would be able to attack so quickly. Unfortunately, the strong warrior was easily able to repel this attack, because he was ready for this. In fact, the bald bodyguard did not think that the hero had such impressive strength. Looking at his opponent, the guy didn't understand whether this was really enough to win. As Yuzi continued to watch the battle, he knew that with this blow, his divine power had suffered quite a qualitative leap, but his strength and Fang Jian's worm strength were still at different levels. It was impossible to win this fight solely by relying on courage, as well as explosive and brute force. Because thanks to that same explosive and brute force, the bald bodyguard could easily defeat the main character. Continuing the battle, Wu Yifeng only thought that he needed to continue fighting and not give up against such a strong opponent. Thanks to his agility, the guy still managed to avoid subsequent blows to the floor, and he got back to his feet. Understanding the course of the battle, the hero nevertheless admitted that with such forces he could not defeat such a strong opponent. Because of this, he decided to use witchcraft to win, not with physical and brute force, but with cunning. In fact, the enemy didn't care at all about this, and he continued to attack regardless of the magic. The young man continued to cast his spell and used the Ursa Major attack, which was supposed to knock down the enemy. The splitting technique was also used to discourage the opponent when he was not expecting it. And it really worked, because the enemy was literally in shock when he saw what kind of magic was being used against him. Magical abilities immediately began to influence the scoundrel, who dared to beat the young man. The casino owner could not believe what was happening, because he realized that his guest had superpowers. The bodyguard was indeed in great pain, and even began to scream from his injuries during the magical attack. Taking a look at his body, the bald man found that he was completely healthy and could continue fighting. Because of this, the bald scoundrel immediately smiled, because he understood that even such a strong attack did not harm him. An insidious attack that the bodyguard had studied for years was immediately launched, but the hero was agile enough to dodge. The worried young man began to realize that even his strongest magical attack did not inflict a scratch on the enemy. Fortunately, there was another way to continue this battle, because if the magic really did not harm the enemy, then there was another way. Turning to his enemy, the hero began to say that if this is Fang Jian's limit, then for the young man this is just a warm-up, because if he doesn't fight to the fullest, others will think that Wu Yifeng is offending the bald scoundrel. This immediately began to anger the giant, and he began to think that in this way the enemy was trying to anger him even more. And it worked, because the villain immediately rushed into battle, shouting that he would kill his enemy. Using cunning, the young man began to act, and realized that right now he needed to attack. Starting to sneak attack, Wu Yifeng used his legs to strike. The sneak attack made it possible to strike directly at the leg of your enemy in order to discourage him. The bald man couldn't believe it, because no one had dared to hit him in the legs before. As soon as the primary attack was launched, it was immediately followed by a second attack, and it was from behind. Because it was at this moment that the protagonist remembered what Yuzi told him. The child said that catching evil spirits involves not only victory over dark forces, but also victory over enemies among people, which is why it was necessary to find out how he would cope with people several times superior to him. The smart guy immediately suggested that if the enemy is several times stronger, then he will use a spell. But this attack would be ineffective, and the master explained that his combat experience was not yet enough, and it was best to use the art of combat rather than spells to defeat a person. That is why it was necessary to listen carefully, because all people have one weak point. This weak spot in every person was called the back of the head. You just need to hit this area a few times, and it doesn't matter what abilities this person has. Because a blow to the back of the head is a win-win option, thanks to which it is possible to beat any opponent. It was clear that after such a serious battle the main character was really very tired, but still he was happy about the victory. The joyful young man immediately exclaimed to his teacher that he had won this fight. Looking at his disciple, Shunyuzi could be seen rejoicing at the victory. Due to the victory in a difficult battle, all the money should have gone to the winners. Suddenly, the owner of the casino exclaimed that the child and the young man should stop and not leave. Turning to the man, Shunyuzi immediately became indignant, because he did not understand why they were stopped. In fact, it wasn't about the money, because the man saw that his guests had supernatural powers, and he had one request. The casino owner hoped for help in eliminating one evil spirit, after which, of course, they would be rewarded. Hearing this, the smart master immediately realized that a big deal could be concluded with this man, and he should not be shy, because it was necessary to talk about this matter in more detail. Some time later, events continued to take place in a huge mansion. As it turned out, due to rumors that there is a mountain spirit in the city, the price of accommodation is reduced, and therefore the capitalists stopped developing the tourism business here. This is because the tourists were afraid of the evil spirit, and now the sorcerers could go to this village in order to get rid of this spirit. Even the young man had not heard of this village, although he had lived in this city all his life. This village was called the Village of Handsome Men, and according to the main character, its owner was a genius, because he was looking all over the world for handsome guys to bring them to the village, thereby making money from many girls. The master was skeptical about this, but still decided that it was necessary to go on reconnaissance tomorrow and find out everything. Suddenly, the hero rose from his chair and immediately began to leave somewhere. Shunyuzi decided to find out what was the matter. Feeling awkward, the young man explained that he wanted to return the money he had previously borrowed. For the master, this was simply unacceptable, because it was already clear that if these scoundrels dared to come to this house, they would not be able to walk due to numerous fractures. Unfortunately, from a legal point of view, this cannot be done, and he will be much calmer if he returns this money. The next morning, the event continued to take place in the city, namely in the business center. At one of the tables, the collectors were playing cards. It was clear from them that someone had recently beaten them well. Suddenly, behind the sewers, someone sharply knocked down the door. This person probably had incredible strength. Feeling intense anger, the men immediately became indignant, because they did not understand who dared to appear in their premises like that. Looking at the guest, the scoundrels immediately realized that it was their debtor named Wui Feng. The frightened man immediately decided to ask the guy why he came here, because after the last time they were afraid of him. Having poured the money onto the table, the main character said that he was returning the money that he had previously borrowed. Now they are no longer connected, because when you borrow money from someone, you definitely have to return it. The bandit couldn't even believe that the young man really decided to repay the debt, but still said that they would be happy to pay it off. Now the bank and the collectors were happy, and one of the men asked them not to scare them like that anymore, because they also have their own bosses, so you shouldn't be offended by them. A slightly angry young man decided to ask the bandits if they had learned their lesson and would no longer offend the weak, because next time he would not let them go so easily. In fact, it was clear from the scoundrels that they simply needed money, and they did not care at all about principles. Sighing heavily, the young man told his master that he was now finished and they needed to focus on catching evil spirits on their way to wealth. Suddenly, an elderly woman passed not far from the guys and bent down to say hello. The hero could not believe his eyes, and looking after the woman, he began to think that she was also a debtor. Thus, the young man decided to act, and still wanted to find out something. In the collector's office, the man began to explain to the elderly woman that she had made a mistake and this money was not enough. While holding out the agreement to borrow money, the grandmother began to say that she had already paid off all her debt and had no more money. The bandit didn't care at all about this, and he believed that the document was outdated, which is why he decided to tear it up. Having torn up the document on the loan of money, the scoundrel exclaimed that now the old woman owed another 100,000 yuan. For the grandmother, this amount was simply gigantic, and she immediately began to tremble with fear, because she knew that she would not be able to save such a large amount of money. Their boss should have found out that she asked for money for her husband's treatment. Now she has nowhere to go, due to the fact that she sold her house in order to pay off the debt. Due to the fact that the grandmother could not repay the debt, the collectors wanted to target her daughter-in-law and granddaughter in order to ask them for money. The elderly woman literally began to beg the bandit not to touch her relatives, because it was her fault that she decided to borrow money. Experiencing strong rage, the bandit began to swing his hand in order to hit the woman, because he was disgusted that she was touching him. Fortunately, the main character managed to come to the rescue and realized that the old woman was in danger. The force of the blow literally caused the villain to crash into the wall, because he was just an ordinary person who was hit by a deity. The master immediately turned to his grandmother and asked her to leave here as soon as possible. Trembling in pain, the man exclaimed that Wu Yifeng was impudent, and he had to get out of here as soon as possible. The collector sincerely believed that the guy was just lucky that time, but now they will make him afraid. The villain simply could not understand how the main character even got it into his head to save this old woman, because she was not even worthy of it in their opinion. The villains wanted revenge for this act, and grabbed the bats in order to teach Wu Yifeng a lesson. In fact, the collector just wanted all the people in this city to know what would happen if they resisted his partners. Literally everyone wanted the main character to die, and the bandits were going to beat him with bats to teach him a lesson. But unfortunately, they still did not know how strong the young man named Wu Yifeng was. The main character was easily able to fight off the crowd of villains who dared to attack him. For a smart guy, this fight was incredibly easy, as if he were fighting against garbage. The main villain was simply shocked by what he saw, because he did not expect that an ordinary person was able to fight with so many opponents. The young man simply could not stand such impudence on the part of the main villain, and immediately hit him in the face with all his might. The impudent man flew several tens of meters to the side, because he could not withstand the force of such an incredible blow. From today, this city is the domain of the protagonist, and no bandit will be able to control ordinary people anymore. And on his territory, Wu Yifeng will not spare anyone who does evil, which is why the villain will need to remember that he should never do anything bad again, because if he breaks this rule, he will pay. After some time, the main character went out to his partner, who was waiting for him in the corridor. The young master nevertheless decided to remind your partner that the more power he has, the more responsibility he has. A little embarrassed, the young man interrupted his teacher, telling him that this phrase was used in Spider-Man. Some time later, events continued to occur in the village of handsome men. The main character could not believe his eyes that this was really a village of handsome men, because there was a feeling that it had not yet been completed. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, a policeman approached and decided to ask the travelers who they were. The slightly embarrassed guys immediately said that they had been asked to come in order to get rid of evil spirits. It turned out that the police were working here for the first day. When the tenants were warned that they could not cultivate the soil, they said that there was a spirit here. Supposedly the village was receiving retribution from the spirit for its bad deeds. But the management continued to ask people to cultivate the land further, and in the end, a huge amount of money was spent on this, but to no avail. While the construction work was going on, something terrible happened, and the policeman wanted to talk about it. That very day, unexpectedly, the midday sky turned red. Suddenly, black shadows appeared in the air. They grabbed and took away the handsome leader with them. A day later, the handsome men were forbidden to be here on the territory, and if they did not get out of here, they could only expect death. Hearing this, the young man was simply shocked, and he immediately decided to find out what this spirit looked like. As it turned out, the repair crew said that this spirit looked like a very beautiful girl. The joyful policeman would also like to see a beautiful girl with a hot figure that sucks life force, but she is only interested in handsome men, so the repair crew ran away from here. After thinking a little, the master immediately assumed that the witch was sealed by someone at the construction site. Due to repair work, the seal was destroyed and she awakened. Wu Yifeng still wanted to find out some more information about the witch, and again asked the policeman if he knew anything else. Suddenly, the policeman remembered that the handsome men abducted by these spirits ended up on the top of a mountain that was nearby. Because of this incident, everyone present here needs to be careful so that they fall into the hands of the evil witch. A few minutes later, demon exorcists headed to the scene to help the victims. The alarmed boy nevertheless decided to ask his teacher if he was sure that they should go there. The child still understood that in any case they needed to complete this task, since the proceeds from this business could be used to buy a villa. Walking along the road, there was a very strange puddle nearby. The water in it was not like ordinary water. The master instantly saw that something was wrong and immediately drew attention to the suspicious liquid. Feeling very frightened, Shen Yuzi immediately ordered his disciple to be careful and stop. As soon as the guy stopped, the earth literally began to crack in front of him, as if something was breaking out of it. And this was really so, because after the earth finally collapsed, it was as if something began to pour out of it. Thanks to his lightning-fast reaction, the main character was easily able to save his master and move away from the scene of the incident. Suddenly, some strange creature began to jump out of the smoke with incredible speed. This creature instantly reached the main character and immediately took him by the leg in order to drag him with him. The guy literally couldn't believe his eyes and didn't understand what the hell was going on here, but the experienced master immediately realized that it was the witch who had come. Using his skills and brute strength, the young man decided that it was necessary to drive away the witch, and struck with the help of magical abilities. Shouting to the teacher to move aside, the guy began to move forward in order to fight the witch. Gradually, the smoke began to dissipate, due to which the area could be examined in more detail. Due to the fact that the smoke had almost completely evaporated, a certain hole was visible, through which the explosion occurred. Most likely, there was a spirit not far from the heroes who did not want them to pass further. The little boy immediately assumed that the witch seemed to be using an invisibility technique, which is why she was not visible at all. Dark magic began to surround the main character, because of which he literally could not move. Evil forces began to envelop the young man's body, and did not give him the opportunity to continue the battle. In great pain, Wu Yifeng felt incredibly bad, disgusted that the witch dared to use magic on him. Literally a few seconds later, in front of the master, his student disappeared completely, as if he had evaporated. Approaching closer to the hole, Shen Yuzi was able to find out that most likely his student ended up in a strange hole that was located right in the asphalt. Suddenly, a witch with incredible power began to emerge from the ground, and was ready to continue the battle with the child. As it turned out, the boy in front of her was too young for a witch, so she didn't want to take him with her. These words were quite offensive for the master, because in fact he was more than 300 years old. The evil witch exclaimed that she wanted to personally understand why at that age he was already a teacher. Shen Yuzi felt angry towards the lady who was incredibly vile and possessed by a demon, which is why he continued to remain silent. At that same second, the main character came to his senses, and although he could not continue the battle, he still exclaimed that the witch's opponent was behind her. Realizing that it was still necessary to continue the battle, the young man did everything possible to not succumb to dark magic. Thanks to the strength of his spirit, Wu Yifeng was able to easily break out of the dark magic, which is why he could continue to carry out tasks. The witch immediately realized that it was necessary to end this battle, and began to attack again in order to immobilize the strongest enemy. Watching his enemy, Wu Yifeng began to roughly understand how she attacked, which is why he was able to fight off the attack. With deft movements, he continued to approach his opponent in order to make a counterattack. Using his leg, the young man was about to swing it with all his might to strike the unfortunate lady. This attack really caused quite a lot of damage to the enemy, the witch literally flew several hundred meters away, which indicated an incredibly strong attack. Unfortunately, the opponent was indeed strong enough to stand on her feet and continue the battle. Having begun to use his magical abilities, the young man used witchcraft spells to defeat the demon. Seeing this, the witch immediately realized that her opponent was using a secret remedy against spirits, and this is a very bad sign. The magical technique was literally supposed to destroy the evil spirit that was in the witch's body. The strongest attack provoked an incredibly huge pillar of dust, which made it impossible to see the damage that was caused during the attack. The smoke gradually began to clear, making the battlefield extremely difficult to see. But as soon as the smoke completely cleared, the hero was literally shocked by what he saw. As it turned out, the evil witch literally disappeared, creating a hole in the asphalt through which she climbed and escaped. The experienced teacher immediately told his student not to run after the enemy, because she had already run far enough. Although in fact, Shunyuzi understood that it was quite difficult to hide in such a state. The injury was severe enough that the witch found it extremely difficult to regenerate, which is why she realized that she needed to get more food to regenerate. The angry girl understood that this was the first person who managed to leave her, which is why she needed to eat quickly. Wu Yifeng just damaged the witch, so she will need some time to regain her strength. All this time must be spent on developing a plan, and first of all, cut off her escape route with fire. In the meantime, while the fire spreads, they will stop here tonight, and the next day they will go to the missing handsome men from the village. Thanks to such an effective plan, tomorrow should be the last day of the life of the brazen witch. The next morning, events continued to occur in the forest, where Wu Yifeng continued to sleep not far from the tree. Suddenly, someone approached the guy and decided to block his breathing through his nose. Because of this, the young man immediately began to feel awkward, and subconsciously realized that it was difficult for him to breathe. Due to the fact that it was literally impossible to breathe, the guy immediately woke up and decided to find out who was mocking him like that. The stunned guy shouted at the girl to get away from him, calling her evil spirits. At that very second, the young man realized that this was the same Jian Nan whom he had saved earlier. The younger sister did not stop laughing, because this act was very funny for her. The proud girl exclaimed that she should now be called mentor and student. As it turned out, this girl also came to Shunyuzi in order for him to become her teacher, and now they were both students. Having finished laughing, the girl still decided to find out what they were doing here after all. Towards evening, events continued to occur in the forest, where it was already quite cold. In order to make it not so cold, the smart demon hunters decided to make a fire. Due to extreme fatigue, the young man decided to sleep again in order to regain his strength. The master, meanwhile, decided to reconnoiter the situation and walk through the forest in order to inspect the area. Unexpectedly, Shunyuzi felt that someone was following him, and he immediately asked that person to come out to ask him what he wanted. As it turned out, it was the same Jian Nan who exclaimed that she, too, wanted to catch evil spirits with them. The teacher was not happy that some girl wanted to catch demons in the same way, and he ordered her to get out of here, because this is a serious matter, not fun. Coming closer, the girl decided to tell her that many spirits can move into her family, and she wants to keep them all safe. Besides, there is a terrible spirit in her body, and she must help eliminate it. Hearing this, the master could not believe it, and did not understand whether this girl really thought that he would fall for such a trick, because in fact no one had possessed her. This made the girl very angry, and she shouted that since she said that she was possessed by a spirit, it means that she was possessed, and they should take her with them in order to constantly eliminate these spirits. For the master, this girl was really very persistent, and there was literally no way to drive her away. After thinking a little, Shunyuzi still decided to accept her into his team. The only condition was that she would take an active part in searching for evil spirits. Because of this, the girl was very grateful to the great master, and bowed before him, saying that she really wanted to meet the second disciple. For the main character, this story was truly impressive, and he could not believe that this was really happening. Thus, now the great master had two students who really wanted to help him in finding and eliminating evil spirits. Stepping aside, the master decided to turn to his student. They say that a lot of benefits can be obtained from the daughter of a businessman. Also, the child knew that Wu Yifeng liked this girl. She is good, and this is really a great opportunity for them is approaching. Because of these words, the boy was incredibly embarrassed, but he was still very glad that in this way he could meet such a beautiful girl. All this time the girl was watching two strange guys, and did not understand what they were discussing there. Some time later, events again continued to occur in the village of handsome men. Arriving at the village, the masters were immediately met by a very strange guy who was incredibly glad that guests had come to their village. Wu Yifeng immediately decided to say hello to the strange guy, and said that it was Mr. Hong who asked them to come here. Turning back, the strange guy said that in the building nearby there were prominent residents of the village of handsome men, and they were ready to do anything to solve the problem with the witch. But as it turned out, these handsome guys absolutely underestimated the main character along with his team, and did not understand how they could help a weakling, some girl and a child. These words extremely upset the main character along with the master, and they did not understand how it was possible to treat the saviors so rudely. Coming closer, one handsome guy decided to ask Wu Yifeng why they came here. Smiling, the main character decided to ask the handsome man if he was afraid of heights. The boy did not immediately understand what this question was about, and decided to find out why he was asking this. Some time later, the scoundrel literally cried with fear, because he could not even imagine what awaited him next. Experiencing severe stress, the handsome man wanted to be lowered to the ground, because he had never before seen a guy so weak at first glance fly so high. Seeing this, absolutely all the handsome men were simply shocked and now realized that these were really saviors who had come to their aid. Nevertheless, the main character decided to briefly torture the guy who doubted his abilities, and lowered him to the ground. The worried handsome man was literally trembling with fear, and did not understand whether he was really on Earth now. Turning his head towards the handsome man, Wu Yifeng still decided to ask him if he wanted to have fun again. Sensing danger, the handsome man immediately ran into the building, shouting that he would never dare to have fun like that again. For the girl, all this was truly unusual, and she decided to find out if the master could do the same, but the master only replied that when communicating with bad people, the discovery of their powers is necessary. Moving closer to the guys, Shen Yuzi decided to tell his plan, saying that now they need one handsome guy who will serve as bait for the witch while they set up a magical barrier. None of the guys present dared to be bait, realizing that in this way they were risking their lives. Absolutely nobody wanted to go like this in order to die, because if they died, then the girls of the whole world would be upset. Looking at everything that was happening, Jian Nan concluded that there really is no need to judge people by their appearance. After thinking a little, the main character exclaimed that there was no other way out, and he would go as bait. This was a shocking statement for each guy, and they all watched Wu Yifeng. Suddenly, the master said that this is impossible, because for the bait they need a handsome guy, not a weakling. Moreover, the hero is an important player, which does not allow him to be bait. Turning his head towards the handsome guys, the master realized that at such a decisive moment there was no one to even rely on. That's why Shen Yuzi decided that he would try to be bait in this way, because the remnants of his magical power could be useful. Hearing this, the ugly guy did not understand how this was possible, because he saw that the master was just a child. Winking at the boy, the master still explained that tomorrow he would be handsome. Some time later, events continued to occur the next day. The time was already quite late, and everyone did not understand why the master had not yet left his house. Suddenly, the door of the house began to open, and someone came out of it. What the main character and his company saw was simply shocking, because they did not expect to see something like that. As it turned out, this was a master who had matured quite a lot, and was truly handsome. The young guy didn't understand why they were staring at him like that, and he ordered them to quickly give him clothes, because he might catch a cold. Putting on his shirt, the master thought that he would not be able to maintain this physical form for long, and his body could turn back at any moment. Looking at the girl, Shen Yuzi ordered that as soon as he turns, grab him and take him to a safe place. Also, the main character needed to complete the main task of this mission, namely, to finish off the witch. Wu Yifeng was aware of his responsibility for this mission, and agreed to do everything possible to complete it. Events continued to happen in the evening. Shen Yuzi began to walk through the forest, pretending that he did not understand that a witch would soon attack him. Not far from the master there was an ambush, where the main character and the girl were waiting for the witch. The determined team wanted to complete the mission as quickly as possible, which is why they kept a close eye on the handsome guy as he walked through the forest. Suddenly, nearby, the master heard some rustling, and immediately realized that he would probably soon be in danger. And this was really so, because nearby there was a witch who was going to attack the young man. A little alarmed, the hero exclaimed that the witch had appeared, and it was necessary to follow the plan. According to the witch, in front of her was an ordinary man whom she really wanted to eat. For an incredibly strong woman, this was an excellent delicacy, which she now wanted to taste. Realizing that it was necessary to save himself, the master immediately began to run in another direction. Feeling a strong sense of anxiety, Shunyuzi began to realize that the witch was too impatient, because they were still far from the magic circle. Having used her magic, the witch began to laugh and shouted that her treat would not go anywhere. Thanks to her magical abilities, the witch could easily stop her target in order to eat her. Because the magic was used on an ordinary person, he was harmed and his arm was now injured. The hero was immediately going to rush to the rescue, because he saw that things were bad, but the girls stopped him, because the teacher told them that he could only leave when the witch was in the magic circle. Hearing this, the guy could not understand what to do in this situation, because he saw that the master was in danger. Only the girl tried to reason with him, saying that they should believe in their master. The chase continued, and although Shunyuzi was wounded, he still tried to escape from the malicious enemy. With incredible speed, the guy ran through the forest in order to lead the enemy to the magical barrier. But the malicious witch wanted with all her might to stop her goal, and again began to use magical abilities. With every second, magical forces were approaching the master, which created an even greater danger for the life of an ordinary person. Suddenly, as soon as the witch's magical abilities reached the guy, he immediately reincarnated into a child. Seeing this, the witch was simply shocked, because she did not expect that she was chasing a child. Sensing danger, the master shouted with all his might that it was now necessary to attack the witch. The smart student immediately headed towards his opponent. Approaching the witch from behind, he was about to strike a powerful blow. In fact, the witch suspected that it was all a trap, and exclaimed that her real target had fallen into it. Thanks to her superhuman dexterity, the witch easily managed to escape the attack of the main character. The smart guy understood that the enemy was quite strong, but he was ready for a tough fight. Watching my opponent, the demon understood that it was necessary to defeat him as quickly as possible so that he would not use his strongest attack. Initially, the young man tried to evade his opponent's attack, and all this time he was thinking about how he could win. Fortunately, the smart guy still realized that he needed to act differently, which is why he began to counterattack. Using physical force, the guy began to swing his hand in order to hit the enemy with his fist. This blow really had the desired effect on the scoundrel who dared to attack the master. Due to such a strong blow, a black liquid began to flow from the witch's mouth, which indicated that she was losing her vitality. Still, the scoundrel was not going to give up, and she again tried to attack in order to escape from the scene. The magic used was absolutely useless, and it had no effect on the opponent. Seeing this, the witch immediately began to panic, because she did not understand why she could not use her magical technique. Experiencing intense rage, the opponent realized that she was in a magic circle and was unable to use magic. Having run to the girl, the master watched everything that was happening, and was very glad that the demon was now trapped. The main character was getting closer and closer to the demon with every second, and wanted to destroy him so that he would not harm anyone else. Starting to panic, the witch literally begged to spare her, saying that now she was in a hopeless situation. For the guy, this was truly a shocking statement, because he could not imagine that such a strong rival would beg for mercy. Because of this, the young man even began to feel guilty, thinking that perhaps he should not fight with a harmless opponent. In reality, it was just another witch's trap, and she called her opponent a fool. The evil scoundrel was about to attack again, and used all her magical abilities on Wui Feng. Such a strong impact caused the ground to tremble, and after the impact was applied, smoke began to disperse around the explosion site. Looking at the smoke, the scoundrel was literally confident that she was able to defeat the enemy who was so fiercely going to teach her a lesson. What she saw next literally shocked her, because in fact, the young man was able to withstand such a strong attack, and was going to continue the battle. Despite the severe pain, the main character began to use his magical abilities to finish what he started. The spectacular magical attack was aimed straight at the witch, who did not expect her opponent to be so strong. A bright magical flame literally began to consume the evil witch, who was in extreme pain from defeat. With every second, the enemy's body was incinerated, and only dust should have remained from him. The magical attack triggered an explosion of incredible proportions, which was visible even to the villagers. Each of the handsome men in the village could see how they defeated the witch who threatened most of the inhabitants of the small settlement. The next day, events continued again in the village of handsome men. After the witch disappeared, the village became much more populated and more lively. Only the master was not happy with the outcome of the battle, because he was not satisfied that his student always behaved like a girl and showed compassion towards the spirits. After thinking a little, the guy still decided to find out if it was really a good idea to invest money in this village, but Shinyuzi decided to explain to him that he should look at the prospects for the development of this place, and if he doesn't invest the money, then it will remain idle. Feeling sincere joy, the girl also exclaimed that her teacher had indeed acted honorably, and the first disciple named Wu Yifeng was still inexperienced enough to make a decision on his own. Suddenly, feeling danger, the main character turned his head. It was not in vain that he turned his head, because he felt a huge blade flying towards him. Using his trick, the young man was easily able to repel the bladed weapon, which was intended for murder. It turned out that the enemy was on a tree and attacked from the air. The enemy turned out to be a girl who wished death to her miracle-working brothers. According to the stranger, this name was literally disgusting, and she believed that the brothers should not exist. The indignant guy immediately decided to find out from the stranger who she was and why she did this. In fact, this stranger turned out to be the head of the Shushan noble group. Her name was Masieo. These words immediately caused Wu Yifeng to panic, and he could not believe that this girl was really a member of the Masieo group. Turning his head around, the guy still decided to ask the teacher and Shinyuzi if they had heard of this group, and as it turned out, they did not know what kind of group it was. The smart master immediately exclaimed that the name of their group really sucks, but they have a cool name, and there's no point in slandering it. This made the girl even more angry, and she shouted that they really had a small group, but very soon it would shake the air all over the world. Now each of those present who were involved in the group of brothers miracle workers had to know the ruthlessness of the lady. Not understanding what was happening, the main character nevertheless decided to ask the girl why she was attacking them. Starting to take out her sword, the embittered girl did not want to answer this question, and ordered Wu Yifeng to shut up. With incredible speed, the enemy began to approach the guy, intending to attack her with her sword. At first glance, the young man's opponent had a tiny wooden sword, and he should definitely be able to handle it. Without slowing down, the girl continued to attack and began to swing her sword to attack. An attack with a sword was unusual, because thanks to the sharp tip it was possible to literally pierce your opponent. For the main character, this was a truly shocking action on the part of the girl, because he did not expect that she could have such a weapon. After this, a series of blows followed on the young man, and he tried with all his might to dodge them. Trying to resist during the battle, Wu Yifeng did his best not to lose to such a little lady. Using her foot, the girl was easily able to neutralize the guy, preventing him from making a counterattack. Thanks to his magical abilities, the protagonist could still somehow win this battle, and he began to resist. But as it turned out, the lady also had magical powers, and began to use them. The magical powers of two rather strong magicians clashed together, and Wu Yifeng wanted to win this battle with all his might. For the master, all these actions were truly shocking, and he realized that the girl possessed the art of sword and magic of Shushan. In fact, the girl was dissatisfied with the fact that the team was oppressing them in the ranking of magic ads. Jian Nan immediately decided to find out from the master what this magical announcement was, but even he did not know what it was. Looking at his student, the master ordered him to end this battle quickly, because they did not need unnecessary attention from ordinary people. Feeling very angry, the girl shouted that she was underestimated, and she would prove that she was very strong. During the battle, the young man realized that this insidious Masieo wielded the ball quite quickly, and he was not yet sufficiently hardened by difficulties, which is why his dispersal technique was imperfect. The guy only participated in a few battles and trained during normal times. His spiritual strength should have strengthened. That is why it was necessary to concentrate all of one's spiritual energy inside the body. Fortunately, the main character succeeded, and now he was ready to win the battle. An unusual technique was used directly on the enemy in order to end this battle as quickly as possible. Such unusual magic really shocked Masieo, because she had never seen anything like this before. Thanks to such effective magic, the girl managed to knock the sword out of her hands, which is why she was now unarmed. Once the sword was obtained, the young man began to use his magical abilities again to launch a magic attack. A subsequent technique that was used by Wu Yifeng was called splitting. Experiencing severe anxiety, the girl began to understand that the matter was really rubbish, and she should do nothing in this situation. The attack was so strong that it literally stripped the girl of her clothes. Looking at his opponent, the guy felt very awkward, because he didn't think that his magical abilities would have such an impact. Starting to close his eyes, the frightened young man began to repeat that he did not want to do this, and everything turned out by accident. Confused and trembling with awkwardness, the girl began to cry, and understood that the enemy had not done all this by accident. Events continued to happen a few hours later at Shin Yuzi's mansion. The main character slapped him in the face and thought about what the enemy had said earlier about magic announcements. The guy was also extremely interested in why Monsieur attacked them. Suddenly, someone grabbed the main character by the ear, because he didn't like the way he was talking to the guest. It was Jian Nan, and she ordered the young man to move away, because now was not the best time for this conversation. Wu Yifeng still understood that the stranger really knew what kind of magic rating this was. As it turned out, these magical advertisements were a page on the website of all masters of magic. They are distributed by strength and popularity. Clients who need help with evil spirits choose from this list. Currently, the Miracle Brothers were in 50th place, causing Monsieur to drop to 51st place. Looking at his phone, the young man immediately began to realize that this site was not on the internet. In fact, this site was hidden from ordinary users, and Monsieur was simply furious that the hero did not know about such a function. Meanwhile, the master, together with Jian Nan, was looking at this site, and was really surprised that they were now in 50th place in the ranking. There were also quite a few old acquaintances on this site that Shin Yuzi had previously met. Seeing this, the master was really surprised that he had not heard of this site before. Turning to the girl, Shin Yuzi did not understand why she did this, because it was childish, and she is not superior to them in strength. Job advertisements are posted on the website in the public domain, but as it turned out, they are inaccessible only to those who are in the top 50 strongest magicians. Because of this, Monsieur suffered serious losses and lost her reputation, so she hates her brothers. Having heard the information regarding the tasks, the master was immediately happy, because he realized that this was a great opportunity to make money. Thus, they all decided to look at the table of tasks together in order to choose the right one. Suddenly, the hero exclaimed that he was really shocked that they got the 5 million yuan task the first time. Monsieur was simply shocked that the brothers were waiting for something, and ordered them to agree to this task as quickly as possible before someone else did it. But the master did not understand why there was such a rush, because this was their task anyway. The girl sincerely believed that it was not a sin to want to earn extra money, and she could help them with the task, and the reward would be divided in half. The master did not need help, and he invited the girl to take a fifth of the reward, but she wanted a third. Still, the smart young man agreed, and exclaimed that he agreed to such conditions. Now Monsieur had to go home. Now they will discuss the details of the task and inform her when they are ready. The main character decided to defeat the girl whom he had previously defeated in a duel. The attentive guy immediately noticed how Monsieur was coughing and drew attention to it. To prevent the girl from catching a cold, he gave her his jacket. Smiling at her, the young man said that it was already getting cold in the evening, and his ally should not be given the opportunity to catch a cold. Such care was alien to the girl, and she reacted negatively to it. But still, the new ally asked Wu Yifeng to give her his phone number so that she could contact the team in the future. As soon as Wu Yi gave his phone number, Monsieur signed it as a terrible pervert, because she believed that he had previously spied on her. Starting to run away from the mansion, the girl shouted at the last moment that she would definitely call the next day, but if the hero did not answer, then she would take revenge on him. These statements were really funny for the young man, because he believed that this girl was very similar to his noisy younger sister. Entering the room, the young man immediately decided to ask the master what they were going to do next. The smart Shin Yuzi first wanted to clean up the room, after which he would go to solve the matter of raising the Longhu ship. For the main character, this was truly unpredictable, because he did not understand whether they would really deceive Monsieur, but for the master, this was a common thing, because he had no need to share the reward. Shin Yuzi realized that his student was still quite inexperienced, and he could not make competent decisions. The young man still understood that in reality everything here is not just like that, and he wanted to understand the master and why he does this. Smiling, Yuzi noticed that this was indeed true, and his student became much smarter. Looking at the main character, the child noticed that the location of the operation would be Japan. Even though Japan in the past was not under the control of China for so long, a residue still remained, the faith of spirits, the properties of yin and yang, as well as Buddhism and Taoism. This country has become autonomous, but there are no people with special abilities. The Japanese task was posted on a magic page in China. This can only be explained by the fact that there are no people there who can cope with this, or no one wants to go to this business, because of which it is obvious that the matter is not easy. Therefore, there is no need to take Monsieur there and take risks. Judging by what Jian Nan heard, she immediately understood that the teacher was going to protect Monsieur. As it turned out, this girl needed protection due to the fact that Yuzi had seen her jasper pendant earlier. This jasper pendant previously belonged to a disciple of Yuzi named Xian Weizi. Hearing this, the young man immediately assumed that this girl was probably also their classmate, but everything was not so. Xian Weizi left the teacher a long time ago, and he did not hear that he had students, but he would need to check it just in case. Realizing that they would soon have a difficult mission, the guy still decided to find out if they would really go to Japan, because in this case the teacher would need a passport. In response to the statement regarding the passport, the teacher only smiled, saying that his teacher could sort out this mere trifle. Thanks to Jian Nan's wealth, it was possible to resolve any issue and resolve the conflict, because a large amount of money will solve any issue. On board the plane there was a huge amount of incredibly tasty food that could be eaten in unlimited quantities. Due to the fact that there was an unlimited amount of money, the main character and his team flew on a private plane, and did not even go through customs. And this didn't even break the law. After all, if a person has a huge amount of money, then he can do what he wants. In this case, the guy couldn't understand why they didn't spend their money. After all, they have quite a lot of capital, but all this time Jian Nan only spends his money. In fact, each of them has money, but without this man they would not have been able to go to Japan. The master had some secret, which is why he cannot use his connections. In addition, the master nevertheless decided to tell one more of his secrets, and admitted that they again lacked money. This money was spent on improving Wui Feng, because this is their main goal. There was also another secret that the main character now had to find out, which is why Jian Nan took out a suitcase to show its contents. Opening the suitcase, a huge amount of precious stones were discovered, which were placed in a small container. The young man was simply shocked by this turn of events, and wanted to understand where such a large number of precious stones came from. As it turned out, by constantly improving, inhaling natural strength, months of life are added, and also by performing breathing exercises, it is possible to achieve a lot. But the laws of heaven are unfair. The domain team studied cultivation for generations in order to gain enormous power, and in order to awaken this power, they collected the rarest gems. For 1,000 years, people have been looking for a miracle cure, not knowing that since ancient times it has been sleeping soundly inside precious stones. Everyone began to abuse the success of cultivation. The team, improving with stones, could gain strength more and faster than ordinary people. Greater strength could become their key to superiority over the world. At the moment, Wui Feng was the youngest disciple, so the master wanted to give him something. Now he will be able to use his power in practice. They will still have time before arriving in Japan. That is why Yuzi wanted the main character to practice his magical abilities during this time. And then they will come to Japan together and cause a scandal there with their madness. Thanks to the newfound power, the master and his students will be able to show these Japs their ruthlessness. Some time later, the young man continued to cultivate his magical abilities, and he realized that the spell was gradually changing him, although now was the worst time for this, because the guy still held the strength within himself. The master also realized that his student had no basis. It was impossible to use only one decimal power given to him. Although the hero used the force correctly in relation to the evil spirits, which have superiority over human abilities. But in any case, Wui Feng is literally powerless in the face of other people's superiority. Having participated in several battles and improved during normal times, Wui Feng has gained his own experience, and the master's task now is to successfully lay this foundation. Watching everything that was happening, Jian Nan could not understand why they were using this plane to improve their magical abilities, because perhaps at such a decisive moment it would be better to find a more secluded place. Although the master understood that at the decisive moment the situation would not play a role, it would be necessary to deal with the evil spirits in non-standard ways. Moreover, this guy suffered changes through the spell of a deity, and not a single person has passed this path. Shinyuzi could not even say for sure that he would withstand everything, and what kind of difficulties would stand in his way. While cultivating his own abilities, the main character plunged into contemplation. Thanks to contemplation, it was possible to control one's own forces inside the body. Each flow of chakra was literally visible from the inside. Magical powers seemed to cover the body and function in a circle in the sky, purifying the body itself. The experienced master, thanks to his many years of experience, realized that the improvement of the ability would now begin. Magical abilities really began to improve, because thanks to the precious stones, it was possible to enhance the cultivation of the ability. The internal channels of magical energy began to clear, the body literally absorbed natural divine power. Fortunately, the master has prepared many precious stones that ensure the main character successfully lays the foundation. Wu Yifeng was truly grateful to the master, because thanks to him, the guy managed to advance in improving his abilities to the level of a deity. Opening his eyes, the young man finally realized that his abilities had reached the level of God, and now he was capable of much more. During the strengthening of the abilities, space literally began to collapse, which is why it was now unclear where exactly Wu Yifeng was located. The guy literally began to feel like he was soaring in the sky, and was no longer on the plane, but outside of it. Looking around, the young man saw that the master and Jian Nan were watching him. This made the hero very happy, because he understood that at birth he was a loser, but thanks to them, now he received a new life. Closing his eyes again, the guy only thought that he would never allow his partners to be disappointed in him again. The cultivation of magical abilities continued. A magical aura accumulated around the young man, which was visible to the naked eye. Such events began to cause concern for the master and the girl, because they had never seen anything like this before. In any case, while observing the cultivation process, the master was very happy and praised his student. By enhancing his magical abilities, Wu Yifeng literally began to break through the boundaries of possible improvement in magic. A magic ball began to form in the main character's body, which was filled with energy. By destroying the three facets, the student becomes half a step closer to perfecting himself to the level of a superpowerful god. Although this guy used to be an ordinary person, he now surpasses thousands of people in strength, which makes him literally the strongest person in the world. Fortunately, Wu Yifeng was able to withstand such difficult tests, and finally woke up. Jian Nan immediately approached him and began to congratulate him on the successful improvement of his magical abilities. Turning his head, the young man decided to ask if the plane had a parachute and other means of escape. He was interested in this due to the fact that his team urgently needed to escape. The guy's gaze was literally glued to the door of the plane, which did not allow him to calmly continue his cultivation. Suddenly, someone came out from another room on the plane and decided to ask if they were finished, because the stranger was waiting for Wu Yifeng to break their boundaries, otherwise he would be bored. This stranger turned out to be an elderly man who had dealt with the pilots of the plane and now wanted to start a battle with the main character. Looking at everything that was happening, the girl immediately began to panic, because she did not understand what could be done in such a difficult situation. The symbol on the elderly man's robe was quite strange, but the master recognized it immediately. Shinyuzi realized that this symbol belonged to the group of 9 chrysanthemums. After laying the foundation, his strength increased significantly, but for some reason the main character still could not see the aura of the strongest magicians. In fact, this ability is revealed only to people who have already died and were reborn again. Realizing that it was necessary to act, Wu Yifeng began to use his magical abilities and performed the ritual of expelling the demon. The elderly man only watched everything that was happening, and was not even going to do anything, as if he was not afraid of such a strong attack. Before the attack follows on the man, he only exclaimed that this young man is still completely inexperienced. After all, this magical technique did not even work on the living dead, which is why the elderly man was easily able to fight off the magic. Thinking over the next battle tactics, the main character did not understand what to do in this situation, but he was still determined. The insidious enemy assumed that in this way his enemy would no longer be able to use other people's techniques, and he could only wait for death. The smart guy began to come closer and shouted that he would teach such an elderly man a lesson even without magic. The elderly man also began to approach, and thought that Wu Yifeng was only cultivating his abilities, but at the same time he did not use enhanced fighting techniques. That's why the scoundrel couldn't even imagine how such a young magician could rely on his cultivated abilities without using them. The determined guy still wanted to prove to the scoundrel that he was capable of more and could easily defeat him. The demonic spawn could not believe what they heard, and exclaimed that it was impossible to kill him in such a weak magician. The fight continued, and Wu Yifeng kicked the living dead right in the face with all his might. The man was easily able to repel such an attack, and only said that the guy really has a fairly good strike speed, but unfortunately, the strength of the locks that the main character used was poor. This kind of attack really caused colossal harm to the young man's fragile body, because he could not fight off the extremely sharp claws. The old man's fighting technique was incredibly ancient, and it had been used tens of thousands of years ago. The modern magician did not understand how the living dead would fight, but still Wu Yifeng did everything possible to evade such fast and powerful attacks. Watching the fight, Jian Nan began to worry about the main character, and wanted to ask the teacher if everything would be okay with him, but Shenyuzi had already put on a parachute and asked not to worry about the guy, but to jump out of the plane. The fight continued. The young man used his physical strength to resist such a strong opponent. There was little chance of winning such a fight, but Wu Yifeng did not stop and continued to attack with his legs, because in this way he wanted to reveal the weakness of his opponent. As it turned out, the living dead not only could dodge attacks, he could also teleport short distances. This ability was extremely shocking for the main character, because he had never seen anything like this before. For the scoundrel, it was truly an ordinary battle in which he felt superior and wanted to finish what he started. Thanks to divine superpower, the living dead threw the main character into the wall of the plane with all his might. Experiencing severe pain, the young man did not understand what to do in such a difficult situation, but still hoped for victory. The enemy decided to get close and pressed Wu Yifeng against the wall using his super strength. Thus, the game had to end, and in the opinion of the elderly man, the young man should die on this plane. All this time, the guy only thought about the fact that this dead man had a trace of immortality, and he was going to take it back to make his own weapon. Meanwhile, the demon was only thinking that Jian Nan was a very beautiful girl and she would be a great dessert for him, so he was going to quickly finish up with the guy in order to have breakfast. Suddenly, the young man shouted with all his might to the master if they were ready, because he could no longer restrain the demon. Fortunately, the team was already ready, and they were about to jump out of the plane in order to escape the imminent disaster. The smart guy thought through everything in advance and immediately decided to save his team, because he can fly and is not afraid of heights. This turn of events made the elderly man very angry, and he was unhappy that his other victims had escaped. Suddenly, something else confused the living dead, and he immediately decided to look away. The fact was that the scoundrel's hand was very badly damaged, although he did not expect this, because he thought that his opponent was much weaker. Meanwhile, Wu Yifeng began to awaken his abilities that he had previously cultivated, and the experienced scoundrel realized that this ability was called the Secret of the Mountain. In fact, the young man exclaimed that this ability is called the Secret of the Mountains and Seas. A magical aura was created around the guy, which was somewhat similar to lightning. Using such an unusual superpower, the guy was easily able to hit the scoundrel, and thereby threw him several meters to the side. All this time, the young man was only thinking about how he was able to learn this unusual ability. Previously, the teacher told him that the secret greatness is righteous. This is one of the essence of Taoism, and he has everything under control. This will be enough for a short time for most demons. But the monastic world is outside the law. Among them there has always been the law of the jungle. Sooner or later, the hero will still have to fight with another practitioner. With what Wu Yifeng has, he can only hurt. Being at the top of our spirituality does not give any advantage. While the teacher and I were discussing the difficulties of fighting with the same monks, they wanted to come up with a universal solution, because before, Azism did not give the guy any advantage, and it was necessary to use force. The Great Gate has a complete system of practice and planning, and all the monks want to find their own path, so you need to put your energy into it and study Taoism, then Wu Yifeng should succeed. The teacher also insisted that when he first climbed into the mountains to practice, it was useless. With a pair of fists, he had no rival in the world, and should learn to control his physical strength. For the guy, these words were truly priceless, because in this way he realized that his body is capable of much, and he can literally improve his abilities to the limit. The master's teachings were not in vain, because Wu Yifeng could easily defeat opponents who were already more than 1,000 years old, even though they were the living dead. The technique of the mystery of the mountain and the sea implied something more unusual than it might seem at first glance. This technique was called this way due to the fact that the hero was as heavy as a mountain, and also, majestic and endless, just like the sea. Using such a perfect magical technique, no opponent could resist her. Due to such a strong impact, the bottom of the plane literally collapsed, and the enemy had to fall to the ground. Hearing the sound of some strong blow, the master immediately realized that this guy had been holding his power for a long time, and many years had passed before he released it. Although he had just begun cultivation, his strength had increased exponentially, and perhaps Wu Yifeng was more suitable for Shanghai than even the great master himself. Although their monasticism uses Buddhism, this is not the right word to describe such a powerful magician. The master literally could not find cooler words to describe the strength of the main character. The only word that came to the great deity's mind was cool, because this was how Wu Yifeng's strength could be described. Feeling the force of the strongest blow, the enemy even began to think that he would finally die. With the last of his strength, the enemy was going to talk to the main character, calling him his younger brother. Having said thank you for the fight, the man closed his eyes, because he would never be able to wake up again. Suddenly, events continue to occur in a certain building where Chinese chess was played. The two children were talking to each other, and the girl decided to ask the guy what happened. As the elderly man died, the guy's tears began to flow and he only exclaimed the word skeleton. After which he nevertheless told the girl that the 37th master was dead. The interlocutor remembered that before the elderly man took care of the guy, he was the one who taught him to play chess, a good old neighbor. For the guy it was really stressful, because he understood that the 37th master was very old and his health was deteriorating. He was afraid of what would happen if he died, because they would never see each other again. That is why the guy who looks like a child at first glance killed the 37th master, after which he turned him into a zombie. Unexpectedly, the girl exclaimed that the other party was heading towards Qianlong Lake. There was only 1 month left, and the formation was complete, after which an irreversible disaster would occur. Due to the fact that there would soon be an irreversible disaster, it was necessary to take the zombies with them, because all the walkers had gathered. Thanks to the fact that the young master's team was assembled, he wanted to help the 37 master because he felt that he would soon die. Meanwhile, the main character was thinking that in fiction, the foundation is usually built successfully, making it possible to control the sword. But the boy couldn't do that, although he didn't care because he could control magical abilities thanks to his cultivation. At the same time, Jian Nan flew up and asked the guy not to worry and to fly closer to them. The noble girl really wanted to help her partner so that he would not fall to the ground from a great height, and they hugged, which is why each of them was embarrassed. This event really confused Wu Yifeng, because he could not believe that he would ever hug Jian Nan again. The teacher nevertheless decided to stop such a joyful event and drew attention to himself. Because Shen Yuzi is much lighter in weight, because of him they will have to share a parachute, the student had to come to him. It was too late to change partners for the parachute jump, which is why they still decided to jump in this way. Fortunately, during the fall the parachute opened, and gradually they began to land on the ground together. The fall was indeed quite difficult, because one parachute had to be overloaded, because the hero and the girl weighed quite a lot. Experiencing great difficulties, the young man only thought that the speed of their fall was too fast, and Jian Nan might suffer because of this. During the fall, the guy discovered that there was an ocean below them. Something had to be done for a soft fall. Using his magical abilities, Wu Yifeng began to use the secret of the mountain and the sea to soften his fall. Because of the technology used, it was as if a tsunami began to occur on the water, causing a huge column of water to rise. This provoked an unprecedented storm, as well as huge waves that could be seen on the water. The landing still happened, and the fate of Wu Yifeng and Jian Nan was still unknown. Fortunately, the smart partners were still able to survive such a difficult fall. Winking at the young man, the girl decided to ask if everything was okay with him. Everything was really quite good with the guy, because he was safe and sound. Suddenly, Wu Yifeng discovered that his partner had a wet t-shirt and immediately began to stare at her. From such an intrusive gaze, the girl immediately became embarrassed and turned away, because she felt awkward. After this, Jian Nan immediately became embarrassed, because she began to understand why they were staring at her like that. The girl literally burned with shame, but still felt that her partner really liked her. Meanwhile, a huge ship began to sail towards the company, which was impressive in its size. On board the ship there was a master, as well as a bald man who was quite brutal and rich in appearance. Taking off his glasses, the man immediately smiled, because he was glad to see such an unexpected meeting. Seeing this man, the main character was immediately shocked, but still glad that he had met a bald old acquaintance. Some time later, events continued to occur on the ship. After the shower, Jian Nan approached the main character and asked him if he was worried. Turning to the girl, the hero asked a counter-question, asking if she had visited her father. It was really true. Jian Nan checked on her father and said that he had an attack, because in the end, the plane was crashed. The event that happened made the girl tremble, because she understood that 2 innocent people also died in this way. The captain's son worked on the plane for only a month, and the girl was very sick of it. She began to cry, and realized that she was probably to blame for what had happened. Starting to feel sad, the young man decided to hug the girl and apologize to her. If he can become stronger, then maybe there will be much less sacrifice, and people in general will be safe. All this time the master was watching his students and thinking about what happened. A little worried, the bald man decided to find out if Wu Yifeng was okay, but Shen Yuzi realized that his disciple was fine physically, but his mental state was clearly not normal. At first glance, according to the man, Wu Yifeng looked really normal. The master admitted that this was indeed the case, although he had been under pressure before, but now he had become much stronger. But he didn't do it. Recognizing himself as a strong person is not enough. This time the guy escaped death, but who knows what could happen next. The man still decided to go and talk to the hero, because he had seen many young people who had gone crazy at this moment, and he could not look at it any further. These words greatly surprised the master, and he asked the bald man named Fan Jian, does he really look so brutal on the outside, but is in fact a very good guy? The good-natured man came closer to the young man and greeted him, and the guy immediately exclaimed that they were saved only thanks to Fan Jian. As Fan Jian came closer, he immediately began to praise the protagonist, and told him to stop belittling his merits. After all, they fell from the sky and landed right on them. It was fate that they were on board this ship. That is why the bald man decided to show the hero how he can relax after a hard day. Some time later, the master looked at everything that was happening and thought that Fan Jian was a terrible person. For Shen Yuzi, the events that continued to happen in the closed room caused incredible anger, because he saw a bald man singing karaoke, and there were some suspicious girls around Wu Yifeng. These girls not far from the young man thought that he was very rich, which is why they wanted to get to know him. But all this time, Wu Yi thought only about Jian Nan, because he liked her very much. Having come to the good-natured man, the guy nevertheless decided to say that he did not want to spend his leisure time in this way. With a wink, the young man realized that he didn't like girls, which is why he had another option. As it turned out, this option was 3 muscular men whom he wanted to provide for the main character to relax. All this was just to make the young man feel at home, and Fan Jian sincerely wanted to help him with this. This behavior on the part of the bald man really surprised the guy, because he did not expect something like this. He looked at his hand. The hero only thought that as he becomes stronger, he understands how fragile human life is. The bald man began to encourage him, saying that there is neither good nor evil in power. There are those who use their power for evil, this is evil. Some use their power to do good, this is good. You should think about this, because Wu Yifeng's power will be able to save many lives. The embarrassed lady came up from behind and asked the young man if he really had no power. At that same second, the teacher came up and decided to say that he was very glad that Wu Yifeng did not make his choice, and there was no need to worry, because he and the people who were doing everything possible were right. But just because there is a powerful force of evil in the world, that's why it is good and right to become stronger to fight evil. That is why the young man should only close his eyes and pretend that he sees injustice in the world, and he himself will face a cruel fate, which is why he must choose his own path. The determined guy decided to thank his master for the restoration, and shouted that he would never get confused again. Laughing, Fan Jian exclaimed that he felt that the young man was getting stronger, and in the future he wanted to see what he was going to do. As it turned out, the insidious man was angry with the guy, and thought that this time he had many brothers, and he was going to take revenge for the last time. Wu Yifeng was very happy that he had the support of all his allies, which made him extremely happy to continue cooperation with them. At the same time, the master was only thinking that the underwater lake had something to do with the 9 chrysanthemums. This time it was really a big problem. Some time later, events continued to occur in the hotel, namely in room number 666. The team had been talking about the 9 chrysanthemums being involved in this mission, and no wonder no one wanted it. The young man nevertheless decided to find out who these 9 chrysanthemums were, and the master told him that during the Sui and Tang dynasties, Chinese Yin and Yang magic, a strange door and armor were first introduced in Japan. It then spread to Japan, the Yin and Yang path available, and the evil 9 chrysanthemums also rebelled, inviting people to take their side. Hearing this, the girl immediately decided to find out if this faction was really that strong. As it turns out, although it is an evil sect, it is also a long-established discipline. The 9 chrysanthemums are vicious and secretive, and the protagonist's team has no chance against the 9 chrysanthemums. The master even suggested that his team simply abandon this mission, because he understood that there was really very little chance. Suddenly, a call came to the main character's phone number. It was Monsieur calling. As soon as the guy answered the call, the girl immediately started screaming, saying that he was not only a pervert but also a liar, and left her to go to Japan. Monsieur didn't want to listen to any explanations, because for her it was just a common tactic of the scum. In fact, the girl was already in Japan, so she was waiting for them, because she foresaw that she would be betrayed. The worried master kept thinking about this mission and said that he did not want to endanger his student. The determined girl exclaimed that Wu Yifeng should be worried, and she decided to ask what he wanted to do, because she was going to listen to him carefully. The guy was not happy with this turn of events, and he kept thinking about the need to complete this mission. Sighing heavily, Shen Yuzi still admitted that they were going to Japan again. Thus, thanks to the common efforts, the mission was relevant again, and the guy was grateful to his team, because he knew that they would not refuse him. A few hours later, a helicopter arrived to pick up the team and was supposed to fly to Japan. The main character was really very grateful to Fan Jian, and the man asked him to be careful, and when the guy returned from Japan, he was going to buy him a drink. Soon after that, they said goodbye, and made a promise to each other that as soon as they met again, they would immediately get drunk. The bald man accompanied the team of daredevils to the end, and waved his hand after them. In the helicopter, the team discussed that as soon as they arrived in Japan, they would immediately need to split up. First, you need to go to the client, and the master, together with Jian Nan, will find some other place, because they need to prepare for the 9 chrysanthemums. In anticipation, the young man immediately agreed with this plan, because he understood that he could cope with the client alone. Events continued to take place 3 hours later in Japan. Following the mark on the map, the main character revealed that he had arrived at his destination. Suddenly, someone nearby began to run towards Wu Yifeng with all his might. Hearing that someone was approaching with incredible speed, the hero immediately turned around to look at the stranger. It turned out that it was actually Monsieur, who felt very angry towards the young man, because he had deceived her. Getting even more angry, the girl literally began to tear out the hair from the guy's head, and thus took revenge on him. Suddenly, someone nearby asked what kind of noise those 2 teenagers were making, as if they didn't know where they were. The door to the country house opened, and several men in a threatening voice told the main character and his partner that if they did not want to die, then they should get out of here as soon as possible. Instantly the girl jumped off the boy's back and asked if the scoundrels that they met were really blind. The self-confident little girl introduced herself as demon slayers, and Wu Yifeng at that time was thinking that he should not have encountered such evil guys. Continuing to observe the strangers, one of the men could not immediately believe that they were really demon slayers. That is why there must be some kind of check, because security could not just let strangers into the building. Monsieur immediately began to prepare for the fight, exclaiming that this was interesting, and as soon as they got closer, they would immediately get what they deserved. Suddenly, the young man decided to stop the impudent girl, because he understood that the enemies could be much stronger. I understand that you can't risk a lady's life. He wanted to fight the men on his own. Hearing this, Monsieur immediately stopped preparing for the fight and asked the weakling not to get hit in the face during the fight. One of the men came closer and decided to ask the guy if he really wants to save this little one, because he shouldn't be so self-confident. For such insolence, Wu Yifeng immediately hit the scoundrel right in the face to show his true strength. Feeling furious, the hero said that they would have too many problems if they approached one by one. Because of this they needed to get together, but still, even so, Wu Yi could easily defeat them. These words really surprised Monsieur, because she did not expect her ally to be so strong. According to the girl, this young man also became even a little more handsome than before. The opponents were still not going to listen to the young man, and continued their attack, regardless of his true strength. As soon as the attack continued, one of the villains immediately received a kick right in the stomach. Thanks to the force of the unexpected blow, one impudent person knocked down several more of the main character's enemies. The huge man began to sneak up behind Wu Yifeng and shouted that he would show true judo skills. But for the main character, this judo was quite useless, because he was much stronger than ordinary people. Although the enemy experienced severe pain while the guy carried out the blow, he still tried to resist. Thanks to his physical strength, the muscular man was able to interrupt the hero's attack. For the guy, this was truly a shocking move, because he did not expect that an ordinary person would be able to stop him. The impudent man shouted that Wu Yifeng was caught, and now he will get what he deserves. The insolent people also watched everything that was happening and thought that their enemy had been caught, which is why he was losing. Using all his physical strength, the man threw an over-the-shoulder throw that could literally break a person's bones. The joyful insolent wanted with all his might for the main character to literally touch the ground and lose this fight. Experiencing stress, the young man all this time was thinking about what to do, because he saw that the enemy was physically strong enough. What happened next surprised absolutely all the enemies, because they did not expect this from Wu Yifeng. Using all his dexterity skills, the young man literally began to walk along the wall, leaving deep traces of his sneakers in it. Pushing off from the wall, the smart guy was able to carry out a counterattack, thanks to which the enemy lost his vigilance and received a blow directly in the face. Such a blow turned out to be quite effective against such a muscular enemy, which is why the man fell to the floor and was no longer going to get up. Suddenly, someone behind the young man exclaimed that they should stop. It was a stranger who apologized for her insolence, because her servants met a psychic from China for the first time. They said that they still wanted to try to fight such a strong opponent. In fact, these were professional bodyguards who really wanted to test their strength, because fighting such a great master is truly a rare opportunity. Sighing heavily, the guy finally realized that this was just a test for him. The customer's name was Kikuko Kazama, and she is the contact person for this case. This turn of events confused Monsieur a little, because she did not understand why the contact person was communicating with them, but the client himself did not show up. Laughing, the girl explained that they had already met with clients, and she was a client just like them. In this case, the client was not a specific person. Indeed, in this case, the clients are all of them, namely the Yakuza group. Some time later, the main character and his partner talked with the girl about how strongly the Nine and Chrysanthemum sect was involved in this task. That is why they needed more detailed information about what was happening with this sect, and whether they had other allies. Because of this sect, and they did not mobilize all their people to ask for help, there will also be other sects besides them. The Shinto priest will be in charge of the operation, so there is no need to worry. Once again, Monsieur was very outraged by this turn of events, and felt that the Yakuza were very vile. After all, they could not even hide the fact that they were the Yakuza, as well as the fact that a cult was involved in this. Hearing this was quite unfortunate for the girl. After all, if they keep it a secret, then no one will help them. It was supposed to be a secret, but now that the Nine Chrysanthemum sect knows about their operation, it is simply impossible to hide it. Looking at his partner, the young man would never have thought that she would look so impulsive, but when it comes to this, he will need to control himself. Feeling intense greed, the girl nevertheless agreed to this task and decided that it was necessary to end this in order to earn money. The good-natured representative of Yakutsk explained that as long as they help, there will be no problems with payment, but this issue is of great importance, and they will discuss it later. For now they cannot give out more information. After which, the girl noticed that the travelers were very tired from the flight, and they could rest in their restaurant for a few days while they helped them. They should think about it. Some time later, events continued to occur in the hotel. Inspecting the hotel's furnishings, the main character was simply shocked, because he did not expect to see such conditions. The boy really didn't expect this mansion to be so Japanese, although many of the rooms inside look quite modern. As it turns out, current culture is characterized in different ways, from classical to modern. Also, Masao decided to warn the main character that she would sleep in this room, which immediately confused him. Turning to the girl, Wu Yifeng could not understand how this was possible, because there was only one bed in this room, but as it turned out, the smart partner wanted the boy to sleep on the sofa. Confused even more, the hero still did not understand why his partner did not simply go to another room to spend the night. Blushing, Masao did not answer this question, and began to say that judging by the available information, this shipwreck has existed for a long time, for about 10 years, if not more, but on the way here it was attacked by 9 chrysanthemums. This meant that there was a traitor in the Yakuza group who was transmitting information to the 9 chrysanthemums. And it was indeed possible that someone from the sect was hiding here, but the girl didn't think that they wouldn't be attacked again until everyone came, so it would be better if they didn't separate. Starting to get ready for bed, Masao told the main character to go to bed first. But before that, the girl smiled, and still wanted to ask the young man something. Calling Wu Yifeng, Masao told him to come closer. The embarrassed young man did not understand what was going on, and began to approach the girl, asking what she wanted from him. Suddenly, the girl grabbed the guy by the hand and threw him onto the bed. Masao literally pounced on the guy and watched him closely. Moving closer to his ear, the girl said she was impressed by how much stronger he had become. As it turned out, the girl's method of interrogation was unusual enough for the main character to tell how he became stronger. Masao began to tickle him with all her might. Having examined the young man's stomach, she noticed that there was a sign of the creation of a foundation on it, Wu Nan Nan. Feeling awkward, Wu Yifeng still decided to calm the girl down, saying that she was still stronger than him, but Masao understood that now her partner really had a much better command of magical abilities. Obtaining such power did not go unnoticed. The girl nevertheless decided to find out if the young man had used some evil tricks. The guy began to pretend that he knew absolutely nothing, because he could not tell the girl that 300 years of the master's training were sealed inside him. Realizing that Wu Yifeng just became stronger, Masao became embarrassed and said that there were some yin and yang type tricks or something like that, but she knew little about it. Putting his hand on the girl's shoulder, the guy pretended that she now knew everything. Pretending to be someone who had obtained magical powers illegally, he exclaimed that he could give them to Masao as well. But Masao did not like such methods, and she immediately ran away, saying that she would not tolerate such humiliation. Events continued to occur the next morning at the hotel. While making the bed, Wu Yifeng decided to ask his partner what they would do these few days. After all, they had no tasks, and they didn't want to just sit either. The impudent girl nevertheless also decided to admit that the young man was right, there really was nothing for them to do. After thinking for a while, Masao still came to mind, namely, that they could just take a walk. Some time later, the two demon hunters were traveling by car. The young man was pleasantly surprised, and did not expect that Kikuko would send a car when he heard that they were leaving. The lady, in turn, was not happy that some driver went with them, but the man turned out to be quite kind. He was local, so he could take them to a restaurant that only locals know about. Still, Masao was indignant, because following them was quite dangerous for an ordinary person. Suddenly, the man exclaimed that it might be dangerous to go with them, because there might be a spy among them. That's why the lady sent him to follow them. These words caused alarm in the main character, because he was extremely surprised that an ordinary bodyguard knew this. And this was indeed the case. The man did not know who it really was. After all, this was all a secret operation. Those who know the details are the main members. This should not have been a problem, and now he does not know what kind of magic they are used. Although there were people behind the man who had much more serious psychic abilities, which was not something to worry too much about. Wu Yifeng was extremely surprised that the Japanese call their abilities extrasensory, as if there was some difference between them. Monsieur suggested that there is a difference between Chinese and Japanese practices, but not the system. This is not so much the purpose of the practice as its understanding. Basically their practice is to regenerate themselves, the intention is to escape from life and death, to break out of the cycle of rebirth. To be immortal is to change one's destiny, so the focus is on one word. But in Japan the situation was completely different, and so far her young man did not understand the difference. The Japanese worship cherry blossoms and then disappear, as if they didn't even have the desire to ask for eternal life in their heads. For example, there was the famous Japanese legend of the 800-year-old Bikuni. She was a woman who ate the flesh of a mermaid and gained immortality, but over the next 800 years, as she became painfully aware of the impermanence of the human world, she eventually died. It is because of this fundamental difference in perception that Japanese spiritual practice focuses on understanding the divine meaning of nature and the heavens. The main character was simply shocked by such discoveries, because he had no idea that they had such significant differences in cultures. Remembering the girl's former words, Wu Yifeng decided to find out if she really is the head of the Shushan group, and who is her master then. In fact, her master was the former owner of the Shushan group, but the guys were not interested in this, but in the name of her owner. After all, he must have heard about such a big man like him. Feeling very sad, Monsieur admitted that she didn't actually know the master's name, but she knew that he was a very good swordsman. Looking at his partner, the hero only thought that they could not be sure that it was him, but the master said that Xian Wetzi went along the path of the ball. There is a high probability that Monsieur is one of them. Meanwhile, the girl began to be indignant that Wu Yifeng was looking at her strangely, because she was only 15 years old. Some time later, events continued to occur in the shopping center. The comrades were walking around the shopping center, and the main character thought that this is a small city, but it is quite lively, which is why they wanted to see the shops, and whether they could buy something interesting here. The young man immediately assumed that all girls come to Japan to buy cosmetics and clothes. Suddenly, Monsieur came closer to the hero and shouted that she did not have the money to buy these things, which is why she would not mind if Uncle Wu Yifeng bought her something. All this time, people were watching the main character and thought that he was some kind of strange pervert. It was very suspicious for them, and they were even going to call the police. The good-natured man also decided to warn the young man that if they attracted the attention of the police, they would be questioned. Feeling awkward, Wu Yifeng tried to defuse the situation and asked the girl to stop joking. Nevertheless, the women nearby decided to leave, and discussed that perhaps this group of people were just brother and sister, although the sister did not look like a strange guy. Even Monsieur understood that Wu Yifeng was very far from being her brother, because her brother was much more handsome than him. This turn of events surprised the young man, because he did not expect that the girl had a brother, because he had never heard her talk about family. And it was really sad, because in fact, the girl only had 2 family members left, namely the master and her brother. When she was very young, her parents died in an accident. When she and her brother went on a trip, they ended up in a mountain trap, and then they met a master. He saved them, and took them in and taught them everything. The main character nevertheless realized that the girl's brother is also a practicing magician, but in fact, her brother is interested in monasticism, and she is interested in daggers and technology, which is why he returned to study in ordinary life. And the master disappeared again, so that only she remained, which is why it is necessary to protect this Shushan group with all our might, because this is their home, the place where the master and his brother can return. Suddenly, the young man decided to pat the girl on the head, because he could not believe that she had so much responsibility. The good-natured young man asked the girl to tell him if she had any problems, because in this way he could help her. This really confused the girl, but she was still very grateful for this kindness. Suddenly, Monsieur noticed something very unusual that immediately attracted attention. As it turned out, it was an ear spoon, which was quite unusual. This ear spoon had a camera in it so that when you took a picture of the ear, you could display the image on your phone. It was really weird, but her brother likes weird things like that. That's why she was going to bring him this gift. As Monsieur walked to the checkout, she asked her partners to wait for her in the store. Rejoicing at the new find, the girl was happy and did not see who passed by her. As it turned out, it was one of the representatives of the 9 chrysanthemums, which Monsieur did not even know about. Meanwhile, the main character and the man were waiting on the street for their partner. Suddenly, a bus pulled up nearby and stopped very abruptly right in front of the young man and the man. Human hands were stretched out from the bus, and in the hands of the people there were pistols from which they were going to shoot. Realizing that it was necessary to save his guest, the guard began to act. He pushed the young man away and tried to get his pistol. The villains began to shoot with firearms directly at the guy and his companion. The brave guard began to shoot back, but was still slightly wounded in the shoulder. Experiencing severe pain, the brave man continued to fire back at the attackers. Meanwhile, the car continued to move, and someone was struggling to drive up to their enemies. The scoundrels were about to run over the bodyguard, who began to resist their attack. Realizing that his life might now come to an end, the man stood rooted to the spot and did not understand what to do in this situation. Some time later, the car crashed straight into the wall and appeared to run over the man. In fact, Wu Yifeng was able to easily save the bodyguard who was in danger. The young man decided to resist the attack of the villains, and used a technique called Attack of the Mountain and Sea. This attack really caused enormous damage to the car, due to which it was thrown several tens of meters to the side. Everyone who saw this incident was simply shocked. After all, no one had ever seen a person possess such power. Suddenly, someone got out of the car and exclaimed that they wanted to use the methods of ordinary people to catch them off guard, but they failed. The defeat of the 37th master has been proven, and the skills of this Chinese practitioner are simply incredible. That is why the strangers really wanted to play with such a strong warrior in order to test their strength. At the same time, the people in the store began to panic, and Monsieur could not even imagine that the enemy would come to them in broad daylight. Only one guy stood calmly and watched the girl the whole time. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about this guy, but in fact, the most suspicious thing was his reaction to everything that was happening. The alarmed girl immediately began to run to her partner to see what happened there. Experiencing severe stress, Monsieur realized that it was necessary to help Wu Yifeng as soon as possible. Suddenly, the same young man who was not afraid of the incident fell sharply to the floor. The good-natured lady immediately approached him to ask if the stranger was okay. The guy was really okay, and he thanked him for the help, because he just tripped. Continuing to move towards the exit, the girl warned him that it was dangerous below, and he needed to find a place where he could hide on the second floor and stay there. But the stranger still decided to stop his savior to talk to her. The guy sincerely did not understand why the girl wanted to go to a dangerous place, because she was supposed to hide with him on the second floor, but as it turned out, she had another friend downstairs, and he might have problems, which is why she was going to help him. The smart stranger immediately suggested that a shot was probably heard below, which is why they need to stay upstairs and observe the situation. Hearing such an argument, Monsieur didn't even know what to say to this, and simply went along with the stranger. When the girl ran, she began to think that it was an enemy attack, and they took advantage of their walk to kill them, but she left Wu Yifeng and is no longer involved in the fight. If they waited for an opportunity, they could turn the tide of the battle. At the same time, the strange guy was watching the girl all this time and thinking about what he should do with her. This scoundrel had an insidious plan, which is why he wanted to kill Monsieur in order to avenge the 37th master. Suddenly, the guy had a very strange feeling, namely, a feeling of anxiety. It was as if some evil spirit was behind him, and it was truly terrifying. This guy was the strongest of the 9 chrysanthemums, but he was in danger and believed that this could not happen. Looking back, the boy still wanted to raise what was wrong, because there was absolutely no one behind him. At that same second, a huge sword hung over the insidious stranger, literally floating in the air. For the strange guy, this was truly surprising, because he could not believe that he was seeing a Taoist flying sword. This sword was literally protecting this little girl who was now in danger. Such an unusual feature of Monsieur frightened his opponent, and he realized that the land of China is truly strong. After all, who would have thought that this weak girl would have such a strong ally? Sitting down on the floor, the guy just began to think that he would no longer touch this girl, but the sword also asked not to meddle in his affairs. Otherwise, a battle will take place in which they will see who will be stronger. Meanwhile, events continued to take place on the street, where the main character was watching two opponents. I continue to observe the opponents. The young man discovered that they do not have any smell, like the old man who attacked them on the plane, as if they were the walking dead. Meanwhile, the sisters began to communicate with each other, and thought that their opponent was clearly thinking about something bad. Wu Yifeng was very angry at the scoundrels who dared to attack him, because they looked like an old man who was the living dead. In fact, the hero was wrong, because only the 9 chrysanthemums are one of the strongest 10 heavens, then only a wizard can control corpses. And finally, Wu Yifeng finally understood that the 10 heavens were involved in all these mystical phenomena. Unfortunately, the young man also realized that he knew nothing about the 10 heavens, and it would be awkward if he said that he had never heard of them. In addition, opponents also pointed out that the master's technique did not change the living dead, it was a completely new technique that he himself developed. Thus, Wu Yifeng even began to think that his opponents were more like artificially intelligent robots than the living dead. These robots retained their memories and the ability to think independently. Moreover, there is no difference between them and life. There are certain conditions that must be met in order to revive people like them. It only takes a fraction of a second to cast the spell. If all the conditions are met, there is no need to go through the numerous steps of the traditional method of creating a living dead. And their bodies are similar to living ones, only with the strength and power of one of the walkers. He will not rot, he will not be afraid of sunlight. This is an ideal weapon against psychics. Hearing this, the young man immediately began to understand that this was truly an unusual trick, and for him it was amazing. In fact, this was just one part of the story, and one of the opponents decided to ask if Wu Yifeng knew the 3 principles of robotics. In 1940, science fiction writer Asimov proposed 3 principles of robotics, which is why he is called the father of robotics. Like them. Firstly, you cannot hurt him and you must stand next to him while he hurts. The next law was that orders must be obeyed unless they contradict the first. The third law is that one must defend oneself, unless such defense conflicts with the 2 principles above. The 3 instructions have the highest priority in their minds. In other words, there is no greater tragedy than failing to carry out the other instructions. That's why they retain their consciousness, but they still have to go on missions to kill people, and there is no way out of this situation. Thus, the enemies were grateful that Wu Yifeng was able to help the 37th master, and decided to find out if he had said something when he was dying. Remembering the old man's last words, the hero realized that he only said thank you. However, the opponents thought that the young man was not capable of killing them, because he was still young. In the next fight he would have to do everything in his power to kill them. The smart guy immediately began to attack, because he understood that in such a matter one could not hesitate. Unfortunately, the opponents were also quite skilled and were able to easily dodge such an attack. This unexpected event caused instant concern in the guy, and he began to turn back to observe the actions of his opponents. The girls were serious and sincerely wanted to kill the young man if he did not want to fight with them at full strength. At the same time, a dose sword hung over the villain, which prevented him from attacking Monsieur. Thus, the arrogant guy still realized that he was not the only one who came for the life of his target. Watching his opponents, the young man could not believe that they so easily dodged his attack. The sisters could not feel fatigue and pain, they only continued to follow the commands and tried to kill the hero. After thinking a little, Wu Yifeng came to the conclusion that it was necessary to separate the sisters in order to fight them separately. The first little sister began to attack. The young man did everything possible to repel such a strong attack. Using all his physical strength, Wu was able to easily throw away one of the opponents. Looking around, he kept only thinking that he was now alone on the battlefield, and there were only 2 opponents. But still, thanks to magical power, the young man will only need 1 second to defeat such opponents. As it turns out, opponents also have incredible speed, with which they can move literally instantly. According to the young man, this was simply impossible, because he had never seen anything like this before. The 2 sisters wanted Wu Yifeng dead and attacked him at the same time, making him unable to do anything. At the last moment, the main character realized that he needed to use his strongest skill, and began to use the secret mountains and seas. Having used such a serious skill, the girls scattered to the sides, and experienced quite severe pain after such a blow. An explosion of incredible proportions was heard throughout the city, which began to frighten ordinary people. Unfortunately, the girls were fine and not injured. They also saw that their opponent was fighting well, because any other practitioner would already be dead, which is why they thought it was better to be careful. In their opinion, it was rare to find a practitioner who continued to study hand-to-hand combat. Thus, Wu Yifeng literally became the first opponent over whom the sisters simply did not have an advantage. The young man nevertheless decided to ask why the girls call the elderly man the 37th master, as if he had no name. In fact, he had a name, but their enemies could not remember the names, which is why they used numbers. After thinking a little, the guy suggested that the size of the number indicates the strength of the enemy, and it was true that the stronger or weaker, the higher or lower your number. The young man thought so, which is why he decided to ask his sisters what their numbers were. At first glance, the good-natured sisters answered that they mastered the numbers 7 and 8. Laughing, the young man decided to introduce himself and said that his name was simply Wu Yifeng. But there was no time for eloquence, because the battle had to continue. The beautiful Gemini followed the main character, because a person who does not die quickly will be cursed. Confused, the guy asked not to curse him, because he thinks that lately he has also become a little more handsome. At the same time, he was only thinking about the fact that he had just thrown away the 8th master in order to keep her as long as possible. Even if she jumped out of the air and used kick, it would take at least 2 seconds to respond to him. There were no signs on the walls that she had done this either, but she was right behind the hero in 0.5 seconds. Moreover, they not only dodged the strongest blow, they also immediately attacked. And the speed with which they escaped from the first attack was simply incredible. The enemies had unprecedented strength that Wu Yifeng had never seen before, which was why it was necessary to come up with a different battle tactic. Instead of reacting quickly, it's more like anticipating attacks. These sisters probably have special abilities that the young man has never heard of before. Laughing, one of the sisters asked if the hero had rested enough, because there was no point in stalling for time. Suddenly, the main character decided to launch a surprise attack, but the girls immediately jumped away from the impending hidden attack. It was quite obvious to them, which is why they decided to jump so as not to expose themselves to danger. Watching his opponent, Wu Yifeng really couldn't understand what was going on, because the video showed that the little sisters easily dodged this attack as well. He simply started a conversation to get close to them in the depths of the earth. It was literally impossible to detect. Fortunately, the first strike was just a warm-up for the really serious attacks. Not far from the opponents, cracks began to appear in the walls, which indicated new attacks. Thus, the girls had to dodge the oncoming attacks right in the air. Clever opponents did everything possible to avoid falling under such serious magic. At first glance, it seemed that the attack was indeed carried out successfully, and thanks to it the opponents should have been defeated. The young man found himself in a fog that spread throughout the battle area and did not see what happened to the opponents. Gradually the fog began to clear, but the girls were still not visible. All this time, Wu Yifeng continued to look in the direction where the opponents should be. But what he saw next simply shocked him, because he did not expect something like this. After the attack, the opponents were alive and well, and even hugged like real sisters. The sisters were very embarrassed, because they could not believe that their enemy made such a big pillar and tried to kill them, and because he was so bad, they liked him very much. A little alarmed, the young man began to think about how his opponents had evaded him, and began to realize that they could probably fly. Fortunately, all this time Monsieur was watching everything that was happening and saw what really happened. As it turned out, the girls saw two sisters reaching out to each other. After which, as if like a magnet, they were able to quickly approach each other at the beginning of Wu Yifeng, one of them, and then again she was behind him. Now the only option for the guy was to end this fight, because they would be able to use each other to move faster. Their ability goes far beyond the limits of common sense. At the same time, the sisters finally realized that the guy was looking at them for a reason, and it seems that he has finally figured out their secret. The fight had to continue, and the sisters decided to act, rushing to the young man to continue the fight. At this time, the smart young man realized that two sisters were trying to attack him from behind. With incredible speed, one of the sisters approached the guy, and was about to hit him with her strongest blow. Fortunately, the hero still managed to block the first attack, and he waited for the second enemy to come closer. The enemy reality approached its target with incredible speed to launch an attack. Using his super agility, Wu Yifeng dodged the two sisters' attack in order to launch a counterattack. Kicking, the young man tried with all his might to do everything possible to defeat his enemies. Immediately after this, the sisters were able to dodge the attack, which could potentially cause enormous harm to them, and immediately began to use their superpowers. Watching everything that happened, Wu Yi realized that he needed to act, and had already thought out a plan in his head that he followed. Jumping with all his might, the young man continued to watch his enemies. Thus, the steam room was able to find out how the sisters were attracted to each other, and he will be able to resist them. This phrase only made the sisters laugh, because they understood that their enemy could not be defeated, because he was a fairly easy target in the sky. Using his magical abilities, Wu Yifeng began to use the mystery of the mountains and sea technique. There was also a secret technique called the Sky Breaker that could literally crush the heavens. A barrage of fire literally began to rain down on the opponents, and they tried with all their might to dodge serious blows. Suddenly, the two sisters joined hands to perform another magical technique that they had never used before. Due to the fact that the physical strength of the two girls was used to jump into the air super strongly, only one girl was able to rise up. For the young men, this turn of events was truly unexpected, and he began to think about what to do next. Thus, Wu Yifeng was still able to dodge the first strike, which was carried out in the air. But the other sister was also about to launch a second attack, and she thought that the enemy would definitely not be able to evade the second attack. The evil sister sincerely thought that the guy would never be able to defeat the two of them, because they are much stronger. The fight continued, and the two opponents tried to defeat one with their physical strength and dexterity, as well as cunning. All this time, the guy managed to evade super strong attacks, and he realized that he was much faster than them. But somehow they always managed to avoid his attacks, preventing him from doing any harm. It seemed that one of the attacks still hit one of the sisters, but in fact, all the attacks were carried out unsuccessfully. The sisters literally began to mock their opponent, saying that they were not even tired, and even if he was stronger than them, they would still defeat him. During the battle, the hero made enough conclusions to make a final decision about whether to continue the battle. And yet, the young man concluded that his opponents could definitely predict his attacks. Wu Yifeng was indeed very tired during the battle, and wanted to rest at least a little. For him, this outcome of the battle was really bad, because he was exhausted, and the opponents behaved like this, nothing happened, and he doesn't even know if he can win if he continues in the same spirit. At least the bodyguard will still be able to escape from the scene, which is why he will be able to survive. The man was severely wounded, but he could still continue to move on his own, because he was not in danger. Having decided to continue to act, the young man understood that he must buy time for the bodyguard and Monsieur to escape from here. The scoundrels really liked it when they were attacked, because they saw the strength of the enemy and the fact that he could not even attack them. Continuing to move forward, Wu Yifeng noticed that the sisters again knew that he was planning to attack the seventh. Suddenly, someone nearby began to scream with all their might, attracting attention. As it turned out, it was a wounded bodyguard who was going to help his comrade so that the battle would be over. Thanks to an unexpected shot, it was possible to distract one of the girls, which gave a good chance of victory. The smart guy immediately realized that this was his chance to end this fight. Wu Yifeng instantly began to move forward to attack his target. The concerned sister immediately started yelling at her partner to be careful. But for the girl, this attack was quite unexpected, and she did not have time to react, because she did not feel that they were approaching her. The young man moved with incredible speed towards the enemy, and, raising his fist, was about to deliver a fatal blow. Thanks to an accurate hit in the enemy's stomach, it was possible to wound the enemy for the first time in a long battle. Thus, the target was hit. At the last moment the guy changed the target, and they did not have time to react. But still, that was not the point, because he had already tried to change the goal, but they literally saw right through him, and perhaps the problem was completely different. Remembering the events that influenced the sisters, the hero immediately realized that it was the bodyguard who fired the shot, and this distracted them. One of the sisters did get hit by a bullet, which is why she was wounded, and it seemed that this would somehow affect her health. But the wound had no effect on the enemy at all. On the contrary, the hero noticed that they were not afraid of getting hurt, and they had no reason to get shot, which made it completely unclear why they did not dodge the shots. During the battle, they always looked at the young man strangely, and still did not blink. Only for a moment did she turn away from the hero, and this meant that she did not see him, and this was not foresight. This is why it is possible to understand that the sisters must look at their target at the same time, only then will they be able to predict the movement. The movement prediction time is quite short, which makes it quite difficult to fight an enemy who knows the tactics of the attack. After thinking a little, the guy came to the conclusion that he just needed to make the sisters turn away. Monsieur continued to watch her ally and was amazed at how bravely he fought. Some time later, the girl realized that Wu Yifeng was giving her a signal to join the battle. That is why the girl decided to warn her new friend that she needed to help her friend, and asked him to stay here and not come down. Waving to the girl in response, the guy all this time only thought that when he turned back, the sword was no longer there. Probably, there was no Taoist sword only because Monsieur left this building and went to help her ally. This turn of events upset the guy, and he realized that now they would lose the 7th and 8th masters, and their red-haired opponent was called Wu Yifeng, and he was really stronger than he had previously thought. But the strength of the main character only caused the guy to laugh, because it was precisely because of his strength that he wanted to make him a zombie. The tired guy nevertheless decided to return home, because he understood that he was hungry enough and could no longer sit here. Using his magical abilities, the young man was literally able to teleport to his home, and at the last moment he said that he would give Wu Yifeng the opportunity to live a little longer. Meanwhile, the sisters noticed that there was another rival not far from them, but at this stage of the battle, the girls did not understand at all why some girl came to the aid of Wu Yifeng. At this time, the young man had already thought through tactics, and asked his partner to attack one opponent, while he would attack the other. Before the battle, the girl noticed that a mahogany sword was useless against such opponents, and it's good that she didn't take it with her today. Taking out a magic weapon from her pocket, Monsieur said that the young man would help after taking care of one of the opponents, and she wanted to see what they were capable of. As it turned out, the girl had magic kunai in her pocket, which she instantly threw in order to discourage her opponent. The inquisitive Monsieur really wanted to show her opponent exactly how to fight. In fact, the girl, with the help of magical abilities, could control her weapon, which she had just thrown like a throwing knife. The main character was preparing to attack at this time, and used a magical aura in order to gather strength before the moment of impact. The sisters really didn't understand what to do in this situation, but they knew that Wu Yifeng was indeed very strong. That is why they first decided to deal with the new enemy, thinking that the girl would be much weaker. Approaching the enemy, the sister could easily overcome the barrier of throwing blades, and approached her goal. Monsieur was brave enough and was not going to give up, even though she saw that the enemy was really strong. With every second the scoundrel was getting closer to the girl, and wanted to make a powerful blow that would be fatal. Suddenly, one of the sisters shouted that she saw movement behind a new enemy. Magic kunai began to dig into one of the sisters, which made her battle quite painful. But the sister still continued to attack, because she wanted to defeat her opponent in any way. Possessing magical abilities, the girl was able to evade the demon's attack and continued the battle. The sisters were furious at this turn of events, because in this way they could not defeat even a weaker opponent at first glance. Suddenly, one of the sisters exclaimed that they already knew that Monsieur would jump off the road. The girl was also ready for such a turn of events, and suspected that the enemy already knew her next attack. Having performed an incredibly fast somersault, the girl threw several kunai at her sisters. Her boots also contained melee weapons, allowing her to attack with incredible efficiency even with her feet. These blades literally allowed Monsieur to fly in the air as she stood on them and moved towards her goal. Moving at incredible speed, Baby tried to defeat the two sisters by fighting them at the same time. Unexpectedly, one of the sisters shouted that Monsieur made a mistake, and she finally got caught in this mistake, because of which she will now pay. According to the sisters, their eyes could literally see everything their opponents did. This meant that the sisters could not predict what they did not see. Thanks to his unpredictability, the main character was about to attack the victim from behind, and was already incredibly close to victory in the battle. One of the sisters still saw a strong opponent, and wanted to do at least something to protect her sister. Communicating with her opponent, Monsieur shouted that they had figured out their ability long ago, and now they could easily win. Feeling very anxious, the girl watched her sister and realized that they would now be attacked. With all his might, the young man hit one of the girls so that she would never be able to continue the battle again. Extending her hand, the girl wanted with all her might to bring her sister back, because she saw that she was in danger. Looking at the second sister, the guy immediately shouted to his ally to stop the enemy. Fortunately, Monsieur saw their ability, and everything should be fine, because she understood how they would act next. Not far from the sister, a large number of blades began to fly, which were aimed at the target. The alarmed opponent understood that this was really dangerous, and at least something had to be done. Although at first glance everything was fine, because as long as he and his sister looked at Wu Yifeng, their ability to act, and his sister would be able to see what was happening behind him. And this little girl's flying blades were just a delay, and it didn't matter that the sister had to turn back even if she was hurt. But this battle was doomed to failure, because the sister understood that her ally had no time to rest, and because of this they could lose. Suddenly, Monsieur closed the eyes of one of her opponents, and exclaimed that in this way they would never be able to win if the eyes of one of them were closed. The sisters were shocked, because no opponent had ever used something like this against them before. Now the protagonist was free to continue his attack, and he used the magic of the mystery of the mountain and the sea, thanks to which he sought to finish this fight. One of the sisters watched everything that was happening and realized that it looked like this was the end of their lives. As soon as the attack reached its target, there was an explosion of incredible proportions, and a cloud of dust immediately rose up. Gradually, on the battlefield, the smoke began to clear, and it was possible to see who won the battle. The girl lay unconscious on the floor, traces of the blow were visible around her. As soon as her sister's eyes were opened, she immediately saw that her ally was unconscious. Unable to bear this, the girl immediately began to break free and hit Monsieur's hands. After the enemy broke free from the grip, he immediately began to attack the baby. The girl tried with all her might to resist her opponent, and sent the flying blade straight at him. What happened next shocked Wu Yifeng, because he saw how his allies had now received a blow of unimaginable power. Such an attack was truly impressive, because due to the fact that Monsieur missed the blow, she immediately lost consciousness and could no longer fight. Feeling fear from his ally, Wu Yifeng immediately began to help the girl so that she would survive. Taking the girl in his arms, the young man tried to bring her to consciousness and asked if she was okay. Fortunately, nothing happened to the girl, because it was just a blow, and she will be fine soon. One of the sisters was seriously injured, and now they could not fight as before using their ancient technique. Having regained consciousness, the injured sister said that Lord Wake's spell had been lifted, and now she could finally fall asleep. These words made the girl cry, because she understood that most likely after this her sister would die. "I understand that this is the end," the wounded sister asked her not to cry, because she should be happy for those who are not in yours, because they always dreamed of being free. It's just that the sister didn't expect that one of them would be one step ahead, and if you think about it, they still feel lonely. After saying goodbye to her sister, the seventh master said that she would also join her sister soon, and she only needed to wait a couple of minutes. Immediately after this, the eighth master died, and now she will never again be able to continue fighting with opponents and enemies in her life. All this time, the young man watched what was happening while holding Monsieur in his arms. Realizing that the battle would continue, the main character was already preparing for the battle, and asked his partner to be careful. Soon after, Wu Yifeng's enemies' eyes crossed, and they were now preparing to fight each other again. Having started to run towards each other, the sister and the main character understood that this would be a battle for life and death. Suddenly, some strange violet light appeared from the ground and gradually penetrated outside. A purple hand literally appeared from underground, which looked more like the hand of a dead man. This phenomenon really surprised Wu Yifeng, because he did not understand what it was and why it suddenly appeared. What happened next really shocked the guy, because the situation was much more dangerous than he thought. A skeleton of incredibly huge proportions appeared in front of the main character, which looked really very threatening. Inside the skeleton was a strange boy, who at first glance was quite weak. In fact, this child could control a giant skeleton that truly had impressive strength. Seeing this guy, Monsieur was simply shocked, because she could not imagine that her new friend was actually an enemy. The sister decided to turn to the master and asked what she should do next. The guy only said that she needed to take 7 masters with her, because they were returning home. Observing everything that was happening, the young man decided to ask if their enemy was really one of the sections of the 9 chrysanthemums. The evil guy all this time only looked into the eyes of the main character and assessed his magical abilities. This look really scared Wu Yifeng and his partner, because it was obvious that the enemy was really much stronger. After analyzing the situation, the young man fell into a panic, because he saw that he and the enemy had a big difference in strength, and now they could be killed. And the enemy continued to remain silent in order to fully analyze the situation. Turning his head, the guy exclaimed that Wu Yifeng must understand that he is still a weakling, and he should return home, because they simply cannot defeat such a strong opponent. Suddenly, a magical portal appeared out of nowhere, which also looked like a huge skeleton skull. Taking their sister, the opponent and the master began to prepare for teleportation to their home. Gradually, the seemingly weak guy began to disappear without showing his true strength. After a few seconds, all the opponents seemed to evaporate, as if the battle had never happened. Thus the battle was over. Monsieur was even happy about it, although she had the feeling that she had been to hell and back 3 times. My partner had this feeling for a reason, because she fought with representatives of the 9 chrysanthemums group. The true strength of this gang was truly impressive, and Wu Yifeng was even admired by such a display of valor, and wanted to fight with the strongest opponent. Some time later, events continued to occur in the house of 9 chrysanthemums. The sister told the master that their enemy was really very strong, and they could not do anything with him. The girl's awakening also failed, and the sister asked not to explain why this did not happen, because their lives belonged to him, and she was grateful that he changed his mind and came back for them. Hearing this answer, the young man only apologized to his sister, because he could not revive her partner. Suddenly, the girl decided to ask her master something about something that had been bothering her for a long time. The 8th master really wanted to know if the teacher could transplant her little sister into her magic eye, because it is their destiny to fight thanks to magical eyes. Everything happened because of events that took place 20 years ago. One family had the most important moment of their lives because one of their daughters was very sick. A magical ritual was performed in the house, which was the work of several generations. The birth of a child who will awaken the strength within himself and will be able to change the fate of the entire family. For the sake of the recovery of the family and the fulfillment of the wishes of the ancestors, it did not matter whether a small sacrifice would be made or eternal misfortune. But the one who was supposed to be the ideal heir was born in the form of twins. And the power was thus divided into 2 parts, thanks to which the 2 sisters had supernatural abilities. 1 strength, 1 soul. This would be the biggest weakness, and it would have to be stopped at the very beginning, but they just wanted to kill the children. But when their father saw that this madness was reflected in his father's students, he realized one thing, that not only had he lost the wife he loved, but he would soon lose his own children. Gathering his last strength, the man decided that he must protect his children, the children for whom his wife gave her life. Thus, the man ran away from the family and took his children with him. The father of the family raised your girls alone, hiding from everyone. The caring dad also used contact lenses to hide the girls' eyes and not attract unnecessary attention to himself. Thus, the man wanted to give a happy future to his children, whom he loved so much. In his heart, the man literally made a promise to his wife that he would provide a happy future for his children. However, his children realized rather quickly that they had a rather unique ability. While the sisters were together, they were literally invincible, because they could foresee anyone's move. These eyes for them were literally a gift from God, which they were given at the time of birth. Some time later, a terrible accident occurred and the truck crashed into a concrete wall. The father of the family died in this accident, and now the girls were orphans. Perhaps this gift was a curse, as well as a disappointment from God. After the man's death, the family found and adopted children of the family who had an unusual gift. To their immediate family, these children were truly special, but they were also very pitied because they had lost their father. The elderly man was actually very sorry that it was the man who died, and not one of the sisters, because he only felt sorry for the man. Looking at these girls, the man concluded that their souls are united, this is their destiny, and no one can defeat them. The man also said that he was not going to kill them, since the day their father ran away with them, the destruction of the family was literally inevitable. Thanks to the fact that the family was destroyed, the sisters could live in peace, but they had to live with a curse. All this time the master was thinking about this story, and did not understand how it even happened. The smart guy never thought that a family that had been together for centuries would become powerless due to the weakness of its descendants. The guy also guessed that the accident that resulted in the death of the sister's father was arranged by his grandfather, but the sister only replied that her eyes only see the future, but not the past. After the operation, the guy said that he remembered the girl's name, and from now on he will call her by name. The girl who had an unusual gift and now possessed magical eyes was called Mizuki Tsukuyuki. Some time later, events continued to occur in a busy city at night. Looking around the area, Jian Nan was amazed by the beauty of this city and wanted to find out where they were located. The master didn't know where they were, but he also didn't know what was going on in their client's head, because now that he looks like a child, and she's still a young girl, that's why it's unclear why they arrived in such a strange place. As it turned out, this time the team was looking for 17 from Tatsuyoko's list, and it was clear from him that he was not a very reliable person. The handsome young man decided to ask his companions what time it was. One of the girls exclaimed that his guests would be here soon, and if he wanted, they could leave. The other girl gradually began to get ready and decided to find out where they threw their clothes, but the guy just answered that they didn't have any clothes. Hearing this, the girl thought that this guy was really funny, because how could the two of them come here without clothes? Closing his eyes, the guy asked his companions if they remembered exactly how they ended up here. Suddenly, the worried girls realized that they could not remember anything at all before that night. And this was not surprising, because with a snap of his fingers the guy literally managed to evaporate these two girls. Thus, two beautiful girls turned into paper people who no longer looked like people at all. While picking up the paper men, the guy kept thinking that he didn't know that Japanese gods were so good. Nothing is attached to them, but they are able to retain memories that an ordinary person would lose over hundreds of years of existence. The god of gems would soon be in place, and the young man was going to greet his guests, but first he needed to get dressed. As Shinyuzi advanced towards his ally, he was truly shocked by what he saw, and thought that this guy had literally gone crazy. After all, as it turned out, the ally had thought of installing a door to his room in the ladies' toilet. The girl didn't understand what was happening, because she knew that the master came here to see someone, but for some reason they came to the ladies' room. However, the team still decided to enter the toilet to see if there was a hidden room, and Shinyuzi immediately discovered a door marked unused. The surprised lady immediately went to the door to open it and see what was behind it. Opening the door, a little alarmed Jian Nan was simply in shock, because she never expected to see something like this in the women's restroom. After all, behind an unremarkable door there was a luxurious hotel room, in which the young man greeted them. The good-natured boy affectionately greeted his guests and told them to come inside the room. Thus, they headed inside the room, and the master asked his student to close the door, because if anyone else saw them, they would be in big trouble. Looking at his old friend, Shinyuzi immediately noticed that Tatsuyoko had not changed a bit after all this time, and he still enjoyed doing all this. Bowing before the master, the young man also exclaimed that Shinyuzi had also not changed at all. The lady immediately decided to find out who this Tatsuyoko was and how he ended up here. The master decided to explain that this guy accidentally ended up in Japan. With him they will no longer be afraid of the 9 chrysanthemums. Because now in front of them is the real god of transformation, who has truly extraordinary power. Approaching the girl, Tatsuyoko still wanted to know why she was accepted as a student of the god of gems, because he had never accepted students before, but for some reason now he has a very beautiful student. This boy literally began to win the lady's heart, saying that he is even younger than her master, and he is only 300 years old, making him quite young. The master did not like this behavior on the part of his colleague, and he immediately decided to stop Tatsuyoko, telling him to remove his hands. Shinyuzi still decided to tell his old partner that he did not have the strength to open the meridians for Jian Nan, and he had to teach her the basics so that she could practice slowly, but Tatsuyoko knew that she would be 40 years old if they let her slowly practice. She will already become an old woman. For the girl, these words were offensive, because she understood that when she was finally able to cultivate her abilities, she would no longer be a girl, but a woman who had acquired the ability to control magic. The smart master approached the girl again and said that he would not allow something so terrible to happen. All this time Tatsuyoko was touching the girl, and she felt that she was losing her sense of vigilance. From such behavior on the part of the master, Jian Nan also began to feel embarrassed and felt quite awkward. As it turned out, all this time my sister was losing consciousness, and soon she fell asleep completely. In fact, Tatsuyoko just helped Jian Nan open the necessary meridians. It will take several days, but they still need to take their time so that the girl can rest properly. It also seemed to the master that lust is the most beautiful thing in a person, and he does not want to give it up for the sake of monasticism, because there was no point in being immortal, and it is better to live happily the way Tatsuyoko lives. Looking at Shinyuzi, Tatsuyoko also why he was so weak, and what happened to him, it was indeed very suspicious. The alarmed child said that he was ready for anything and had to win the decisive battle, but at that moment he was ambushed. After thinking a little, Tatsuyoko suggested that there were not many people in the world who could defeat the god of gems. The man knew most of them, but still wanted to find out who it was. Shinyuzi didn't even want to think about his defeat by a score, because he couldn't believe that he could lose to someone. The loss happened on a terrible rainy day, when lightning flashed and it was very cloudy and gloomy. On that day, a fateful event occurred that influenced the future fate of Shinyuzi. The god of gems literally cried in pain that day, because he did not expect to be overthrown by such a strong opponent. This opponent turned out to be Xian Wei-zi, the god under whose protection Masieo is now. The deity could not believe this story, because in his opinion it was impossible, because brother Xian Wei-zi is a kind and noble person. In addition, the three of them are best friends from the sons of Mount Shu family, like brothers. That is why Tatsuyoko was sure that Shinyuzi would not have been harmed by his brother, but the master had not seen his friend for more than 10 years, and for them, 10 years had passed in the blink of an eye. But for the world of humanity, quite a lot has changed in 10 years, and these changes were critical. The deities, while they are on planet Earth, forget that in fact they are in the world of people. Some time later, events continued to take place in the Yakuza mansion, where Masieo was resting after a difficult battle. The main character had been monitoring the girl's condition all this time, and wanted her to wake up as soon as possible to find out if everything was okay with her. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. The young man immediately sensed danger, fearing that the enemy had arrived at the mansion. Having opened the door, to the guy's surprise there was no danger, and the allies arrived. Miski Kikuka turned to Wu Yifeng, asking him to leave the room for a few minutes in order to talk. The good-natured ladies were very sorry that this happened, because of their cover, they put them in danger, but fortunately, everyone was safe and sound. Only the bodyguard named Daimon could not move yet, but nothing threatened his life. I turned to my ally. The woman wanted to ask him to consider whether he wants to continue this task, because it is important, because Miss Masieo was injured, and if they decide to leave, then she will find someone else who can help. All this time, the young man was only thinking about the need to complete this task, because he understood how strong his opponent was. This opponent was a true master of 9 chrysanthemums, who was the most powerful opponent that the hero had previously encountered. The determined guy told Miss that as soon as Masieo woke up from the concussion, she would immediately recover when she rested. They also have something else they can do to continue this mission. But the main condition in order to complete this task is the availability of funds that will act as a reward. The woman was pleased to hear this, and she was glad that she had such brave allies, which is why she wanted to get together and meet tomorrow to tell the subsequent details to complete the task. And today the team could have a good rest, because behind the mansion there was a small hot spring. Thanks to this hot spring, it was possible to wash away fatigue and use it to relax. While relaxing in the hot spring, Wu Yifeng thought that only when you truly relax will you realize that you are in pain. Looking at his hand, the guy realized that Masieo was also a practicing magician, and still received injuries from just one blow, and this battle with the sisters was indeed tiring. In fact, Master Shinyuzi was right. The secret of mountain and sea is indeed a suitable technique at this stage, but he is the one who is able to force an inexperienced person to fight at the level of God. After such a battle, anyone will be left without strength. But now the gems inside the protagonist have begun to take shape, and he is only one attempt away from successfully completing the formation of the power. Suddenly, some girl nearby also climbed into the hot spring, and exclaimed that she didn't expect the Kukiku faction to cause such a fuss on the streets, and should have come here earlier. Turning to the hero, the girl decided to ask what he thought the 2 practitioners from China would leave or stay in Japan, because after all, they were attacked several times in a short time. This behavior on the part of the girl was very strange for Wu Yifeng, because he did not understand who the stranger took him for, and apparently, he really did not come on time. Realizing that it was necessary to get out of this place, the guy thought that if some kind of misunderstanding arises, then he will be finished. Unexpectedly, the lady decided to stop the hero by grabbing his hand. As it turned out, the girl thought that her friend was in the hot spring, because the stranger herself was without glasses, and she had difficulty seeing who was bathing right now. Moving her hands down, the stranger said that this was not the first time they had taken a bath together, but he was still shy, which is why she wanted to see his reaction. Lowering her hands lower, she was truly in shock, because she did not understand what her companion was doing. For the main character, these events were really very surprising, because he was extremely embarrassed after what the girl started doing. Suddenly, the lady gradually began to sink under the water not far from Wu Yifeng. Soon she completely sank under the water in order to dive and wash her hair. The main character watched everything that was happening and did not understand that the stranger was doing this, because it all looked very strange. What happened next defies any explanation at all, and Wu Yifeng was simply shocked by the subsequent events. Suddenly, someone started knocking on the door, trying with all their might to get into the hot spring area. Some time later, events continued to occur the next morning. As if nothing had happened, the young man sat in the room with Monsieur and talked with the girl who hired him. The girl still felt quite bad, and Wu Yifeng did not understand why she came here, because she could still go to her room and rest. But Monsieur only exclaimed that she should not underestimate her professionalism. If she could not participate in the meeting, they would not hear important information. Kukiko was very glad that her guests still decided to stay, because she would like to introduce them to Japanese psychics. They will work with them. Immediately after this, the psychics gradually began to enter the room for introductions. As it turned out, that same girl from the hot springs was the priestess Yuan Li Song, and her colleague was Saki. He was a guardian samurai. Yuan Li Song and Wu Yifeng's gaze immediately crossed paths, and they realized that they had met each other before. Feeling awkward, the girl immediately bowed down to the magicians from China as a sign of acquaintance. Blushing, the young man also introduced himself, saying that he was very glad to meet you. Suddenly, Monsieur saw that the hero and this girl were acting very strangely, as if they had seen each other before. I turned to my colleague. Saki wanted to know what was the matter, because he also noticed that something was wrong here. The embarrassed girl decided to tell her boyfriend what really happened last night. Because of this, Saki was immediately furious, because he realized that he now hated Wu Yifeng. Feeling furious, Saki began to take out his katana and shouted that he would now behead Wu Yifeng. Yuan Li Song began to stop him, saying that it was her fault, because due to poor eyesight she did not understand who was at the hot springs. Monsieur also immediately began to defend her partner, shouting that first Saki would have to fight with her, and only then would he get to Wu Yifeng. Watching everything that was happening, the woman only thought that it was really good to be young. Some time later, the team finally calmed down, and they decided that it was necessary to start a meeting. The smart young man immediately decided to find out exactly where Qianlong Lake was located, and it was also necessary to find out what to look for on this lake. As it turns out, Qianlong Lake is a legendary lake, rumored to be where the dragon god sleeps. Monsieur immediately assumed that this island was similar to Penglai Island or something like that, in which case it was not clear how to get to the place if one could not be sure whether it existed. After thinking for a while, Yuan Li Song guessed that since they were going to Qianlong Lake to rescue the sunken ship, it was naturally an existing place. In fact, the place they were going to was quite famous. This lake was called Biwa, and it was located in Shiga Prefecture. Still feeling very sad, the lady decided to tell that all these events began more than 60 years ago. In 1945, the Japanese government accepted the lady's declaration and officially announced its defeat and surrender that same year, after various political deals and games. The United States pushed the Soviet Union into the background, monopolizing the victory of the Allied powers and beginning the military occupation of this country. Since the war began, it is only right that this country should suffer the consequences of defeat, but for ordinary people, life here is like living in hell. The Japanese government is completely unreliable and unable to maintain order and protect its people, which is why mafia organizations such as the Yakuza have taken on this responsibility as violent civil society organizations. But at the same time, it was impossible to say how long this would last, so the forces operating in the shadows came up with a plan to revive the dragon god. These words really surprised the main character, because he did not expect that they were somehow going to revive the dragon god. People who do not understand reality begin to look for a mysterious power to break the deadlock, which is why it is necessary to find the immortal dragon and ask for his blood, and then create an army to return the country's luck. It was a plan that seemed a little ridiculous, but at the time it was the only hope for the Japanese. Thus, the young man realized that the Ryujin cult of the time and the Yakuza were working together on this plan. But this was not true, even though the Yakuza began as a land-based business, and Ryujin came from the synthetic canon. The one who found them and came up with this bizarre plan for mortals to truly touch the realm of the gods is a high school of Shinto called 9 Chrysanthemums. Now that Kikiko thought about it, she realized that they were indeed completely used when it was believed that they all had the same goal, but the factions and chrysanthemums did not care at all about the lives of ordinary people. This is why it was completely clear even to Masao that the Yakuza faction had been betrayed. And this was indeed true, because the Yakuza paid a terrible price for betrayal, including Yuan Li Song's great-grandfather, and the then head of the Yakuza. There were more than 100 people on the ship, but none of them returned alive. Since the operation was quite secret, after the betrayal, those of them who did not participate in the operation lost all traces of the underground lake, but they did not give up after a long search. Now the Yakuza could finally turn around and right the wrongs they had done in the past. The 9 Chrysanthemum faction may finally not be as strong as before, but one of those present at this meeting came here as a spy. Looking at one of the Yakuza, Yuan Li Song was able to guess that he was the spy. Hearing this, the man was simply shocked, and he immediately began to worry because he suspected espionage. Starting to laugh, the scoundrel exclaimed that they had figured him out, but that was good, because he was going to wait until they got together and died during the battle. Watching the traitor, Kikuko hated such scum, because it was not clear why a brother who drank a cup of wine would become a spy for the Chrysanthemum faction. This only made the traitor laugh, because he understood that Kikuko Kazama did not understand that there is a limit to what people can do, and in this situation people are not omnipotent. That's why this man was no longer human, and now he was capable of much more than before. This man was immortal, strong and powerful. Even if he gets shot, he will not die. As long as he has the strength of a walking corpse, he can be reborn endlessly. The only thing to do is to finish off Kikuko. Anyone will agree to such a deal. He sighed heavily. The main character realized that he would again have to fight one of the walking dead, which is why he decided to find out what this guy's number was. This question literally made the man nervous, because he did not know that there was some kind of numbering. The team immediately started laughing because they realized that this guy didn't even have his own number. This behavior began to anger the man, and he ordered his enemies not to dare look down on him. After all, this guy was going to show exactly what he is capable of and how he can conduct battles. A few seconds later, the traitor was very surprised that he could see his own body from afar. It turned out that it was Saki who decided to end the eternal life of this guy, and gracefully ended his existence. According to professional samurai Saki, this enemy was truly too noisy to live.